Chapter 3300. Lin Sun's tall figure stood in the void calmly. At that moment, Du So almost threw a desperate blow at Lin Sun. Even if he managed to restrain himself, his old face had already turned red, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. "Why didn't you say anything when you came?" Du So couldn't help coughing up blood, but his face was full of excitement. Lin Sun was here. How could he not be happy? But in a moment, his smile froze and his heart sank to the bottom. He quickly transmitted his voice to Lin Sun. "Why are you so stupid? You know the situation, but you still want to get involved. Run. I'll hold them back, even if I have to risk my life. Hurry up." In the end, Du So's voice was filled with anxiety. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing and patted Du So's shoulder. "Don't worry about me. Just watch from aside." Du So was stunned. In the distance, Zhong Xiu's surprised voice sounded. "I was wondering who it was." "It's you." Ba Ju, Fei Ye, and Xiao Yunzi were also surprised and delighted. Previously, they had sensed danger and avoided it. But when they saw Lin Sun's figure clearly, they were all excited. "It seems that you've been waiting for me for a long time." Lin Sun looked over, and his eyes also became indifferent and cold. "Of course." Zhong Xiu pointed at Du So and said with a smile, "Do you know why we want to deal with this old guy? It's to force you to show your trace. Even if you hide and don't come out, as long as we capture this old guy, he will be a hostage enough to threaten you." Du So's face changed constantly, and he shouted, "Shameless!" But no one paid attention to him. All eyes were fixed on Lin Sun. Fei Ye suddenly asked, "Lin Sun, when did you come to the bound of universe?" Lin Sun glanced at him and said, "Including today, it's exactly half a month." Fei Ye seemed to be much more relaxed, and said, "So, you've already begun to comprehend the power of the origin of universe?" Everyone fixed their eyes on Lin Sun. Du So was about to say something, but was stopped by Lin Sun. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd and said, "Why don't you get a try?" He appeared to be very calm and collected. This made Zhong Xiu and the others frown slightly. They didn't know whether Lin Sun was bluffing or he was confident. What a joke. Even if you came half a year earlier, the amount of power of heaven and earth that you could comprehend and control would not be that strong. Zhong Xiu's voice was cold. As he spoke, an invisible world emerged from his body with a bang. It was filled with surging qi of heaven and earth, which evolved into a vast and beautiful civilization and the power of the Great Way, and pressed down on Lin Sun fiercely. He and the other heavenly mandate envoys had cultivated here for many years, and the power of heaven and earth that they had refined was extremely rich and powerful. In contrast, he did not believe that Lin Sun, who had just arrived in the bound of universe, could comprehend and master much of the origin of Black Yellow. Boom! A world soared through the sky and crushed down. How terrifying was such a scene! It caused the mountains and rivers to collapse, while space exploded into pieces. "Let me." Du So was the first to step forward, but his figure was caught by Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun waved his left hand casually. The world of heaven and earth formed by Zhong Xiu vanished completely in front of Lin Sun like a piece of paper. Du So was dumbfounded. He had planned to struggle when he was caught by Lin Sun, but at this moment he was stunned and forgot to struggle. Even Zhong Xiu and the other heavenly mandate envoys changed their expression slightly. "You've cultivated in this world for so long, and this is all you've got." Lin Sun sneered, and his eyebrows were full of disdain. "Humph!" Zhong Xiu's face darkened, and he took a deep breath. Boom! Billions of rays of light rose from his tall figure and condensed into a world of heaven and earth. Its power was much stronger than before. Accompanied by a clear and melodious sword cry, the Taoist sword on Zhong Xiu's back swept out. In a flash, the world of heaven and earth merged into his Taoist sword, causing the Taoist sword to burst out with a terrifying aura. Slash! With a loud shout, the Taoist sword soared into the sky and slashed down. Looking from a distance, the Taoist sword seemed to be infinitely tall, and it carried a vast world with the aura of civilization and the Great Way. This sword seemed to be formed by an era. But Lin Sun didn't even look at it. He suddenly slapped out his palm. Bang! The Taoist sword seemed to be hit by an ancient divine mountain. It shook violently, and the world, civilization, and great way contained in the Taoist sword burst like bubbles and collapsed. In the end, the Taoist sword let out a whine and was slapped away by the power of Lin Sun's palm. Puff! The figure of Zhongshu staggered and coughed up blood. His face was full of horror. A palm, a sword that broke Zhongshu's power. The scene caused everyone's bodies to stiffen and their expressions to change drastically. How is this possible? How can he master such a strong power of heaven and earth when he just arrived in this world? Fei was shocked and angry. He could see that the power of Lin Sun's palm seemed to be understated, but it was full of the power of heaven and earth. It contained an invisible realm that carried the power of Lin Sun's great way. But he didn't expect that such a palm could defeat Zhongshu's sword with irresistible force. It should be known that Zhongshu had been immersed in the bound of heaven and earth for more than 10,000 years. No one knew how much power of heaven and earth he had refined. In contrast, Lin Sun had obviously just arrived in the bound of heaven and earth not long ago, but he could do this. How could people not be surprised and surprised? At this moment, even Du So was stunned. He looked Lin Sun up and down, as if he was getting to know Lin Sun again. Who else wants to try? Lin Sun asked. He was calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos. The reason why he wasn't in a hurry to make a move was that he wanted to have a try to see how far he had comprehended and mastered the way of heaven and earth. Arrogant. Xiao Yunzi snorted coldly and waved the silver spear in his hand. Boom! The spear flew across the sky, and the image of an arrow appeared. It was dazzling, as if an arrow was coming. Vaguely, the sound of various great ways resounded, adding a shocking momentum. Unlike Zhongshu, Xiao Yunzi's combat power was at its peak. At this moment, when he made a move, the momentum was beyond imagination. At this moment, Lin Sun finally looked serious. This blow made him feel some pressure. But it was just a little bit of pressure. Clang! Lin Sun stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the abyssal sword swept out. Then, Lin Sun gathered all the power of the way of heaven and earth in his sword and slashed across the sky. Boom! The heavens and the earth were instantly filled by a strand of sword will that shot into the sky. The majestic sword will was boundless and boundless, and it contained countless grand Daos and countless civilizations. If Xiao Yunzi's blow contained the power of an era, then Lin Sun's blow seemed to contain the power of many eras. Then, Lin Sun's blow seemed to contain the power of many eras. Boom! In the earth-shattering collision, endless light rained down. The silver spear was cut into two and flew out. Xiao Yunzi's figure was split into two. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and his spirit escaped first, so he could avoid the possibility of being obliterated. But even so, that shocking scene still caused the hairs of everyone present to stand on end, and their souls almost left their bodies. Xiao Yunzi, who was at the peak of his cultivation, couldn't make a move. He was seriously injured by the sword, and only his spirit was left. Lin Sun frowned slightly. I didn't manage to kill him with one strike. It seems that I haven't refined enough power of heaven and earth. This shocked Du So, and he felt like he was in a mess. This was still not enough. Go! At this moment, Zhongshu and the rest realized that something was wrong. They turned around and fled. Initially, when they saw Lin Sun, they were surprised and excited. They thought that they could easily take down Lin Sun if they seized the perfect opportunity. After all, they had cultivated in this world for many years and had refined enough power of heaven and earth. But at this moment, they were panic-stricken. There was only one thought in their mind. Run. Run as far away as possible. If you want to leave, you have to let me send you off. As Lin Sun spoke, his figure suddenly glowed. Boom! A world formed by the power of heaven and earth appeared and instantly covered the endless mountains and rivers. The power of civilization and great ways surged in it and completely enveloped the void in all directions. As for Zhongshu and the rest, they only felt their vision darken. Their figures were suppressed uncontrollably into the world of heaven and earth that Lin Sun had formed. Compared to this vast world, their figures were as small as ants. They couldn't struggle at all. It was also at this moment that they deeply realized how terrifying the power of heaven and earth that Lin Sun had mastered was. It had long surpassed theirs. It was a pity that they now understood that it was all over. In the next moment, they felt a sharp pain in their consciousness and lost all their senses. Boom! At the same time, Lin Sun kept his cultivation and said disappointedly, "I thought that these old fellows would be very powerful. It turns out that they are only as so." Beside him, Du So's expression stiffened. He was shocked and speechless. If they had known that this lad had become so powerful, they wouldn't have been so worried. Why did they have to risk their lives? "Senior, how are your injuries?" Lin Sun asked with concern. Du So woke up from his chaotic thoughts. He shook his head and said, "My injuries are not serious. I just don't understand. Did you really come here half a month ago?" Lin Sun said, "Of course. But how did you master such a powerful way of heaven and earth?" Du So couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun asked in reply, "Is this considered powerful?" He clearly knew that he had only refined about 50% of the power of heaven and earth in his great ways. He was far from truly refining it to perfection. Looking at Lin Sun's puzzled expression, Du So's lips twitched violently. This lad probably didn't know how powerful his current combat power was. "By the way, I remember that the old priest is also in this world, right?" Lin Sun asked. "Where is he now?" Du So's expression changed at the mention of the old priest. He said, "Quick, let's go find that old fellow. I'm worried that he might be in trouble." The 5th chapter was delivered. Let's talk about something important. If there were no accidents, the book would be finished by the end of the month. After the book was finished, Goldfish would consider writing some extra articles about the talents on the public account to fill in the small holes left unfilled in the previous period. For those who didn't follow the public account, just open it. You could see the new articles as soon as possible. Chapter 33:01. Whoosh, whoosh. Carrying Lin Sun, Du So teleported with all his might in the void. He was already severely injured and had consumed a great deal of his strength, but he couldn't care about that right now. Fortunately, Lin Sun was there to take him with him, otherwise he would not have much strength to run around at all. Along the way, Lin Sun learned that Du So and the old priest had been staying in the bound of universe all these years. It wasn't that they didn't want to leave, but the chi they refined couldn't resonate with the heaven and earth of this world. The 9 heavens mandate envoys of the 9 tribes of absolute beginning were the same. At the end of the day, there were only a handful of people who had managed to pass through the 9 heavens of the myriad spirits God realm. On the other hand, Du So also found out what Lin Sun had experienced after entering the ruins of Tao, especially when he found out that Lin Sun had already attained the perfection stage of the boundless realm in the Tao evolution world. Du So vaguely understood why Lin Sun had grasped the way of heaven and earth so powerful in just half a month after arriving in the bound of heaven and earth. In the final analysis, it was because Lin Sun's cultivation had long surpassed the level of infinite Tao Lord, and he had become the real infinite dominator. What was the boundless ruler? Attaining the ultimate perfection of the boundless realm, stepping onto the end of the eternal Tao path. On the other hand, only Golden Cicada, the core master, Chun Linkong, Heya, and the ape ancestor were known to have stepped foot into this realm in the ruins of profound Tao. As for the boundless Tao Lord, he was the existence that was closest to perfection. The 9 destiny path lords of the 9 divisions of absolute beginning and the founding ancestors of the 4 ancestral halls were also at this level. They were also extremely rare. However, compared to the boundless hegemon, he was still on a lower level. Now that Lin Sun was the boundless dominator, he had undoubtedly surpassed the patriarchs of the 4 great ancestral halls and the master of destiny path of the 9 divisions of the Taichu clan. Du So could not help but be shocked when he realized this. As far as he knew, Lin Sun had only cultivated for more than 1,000 years. It was also at this time that Du So felt that it was reasonable for Lin Sun to suppress Zhongshu and the other 3. After all, the current Lin Sun was a boundless sovereign. with Lin Sun's help, who in the bound of universe could be his enemy. I can only hope that nothing will happen to the old priest, Duso murmured to himself. For hours later, Duso's figure appeared in the midst of a collapsed and withered mountain and river. His expression was extremely ugly. This was originally the place where he and the old priest resided. A few days ago, the old priest had also fought intensely with Xidagarba, Do Tianyuan, and the cloud-traversing boat here. But now, the old priest was nowhere to be seen. Looking at the traces of battle here, they went in this direction. Lin Sun looked at the nearby mountains and rivers for a moment, and then looked into the distance. Duso took a deep breath and suppressed the bad premonition in his heart, intending to continue the search with Lin. Suddenly, a series of ripples appeared in the distant void. Following that, Xidagarba, Do Tianyuan, and cloud-traversing boat appeared out of thin air, and there were two more people beside them. One was a black-haired, black-clothed man with a saber on his back, and the other was a beautiful woman with gray hair that fell to her waist. The former was called Shan Tu, and the latter was called Lu Yao. They were both envoys of Heaven's mandate. I didn't expect you to bring Lin Sun here, due south, when they saw Lin Sun standing side by side with Duso. Xidagarba and others were surprised, and then their eyes lit up as if they were staring at the long-awaited prey. Why are Zhongshu and others missing? Some people frowned and noticed that something was wrong. As soon as these words came out, all the destined messengers present frowned. Where's the old priest? What did you do to him? Duso asked with a livid face. He's not dead, but he's imprisoned by us. Xidagarba, dressed in a pale cyan robe, said indifferently, hand over the old priest, and I'll give Zhongshu back to you. Lin Sun suddenly said and reached out his hand to pick up a figure. It was Zhongshu who had been suppressed. Seeing this, Xidagarba and others' faces darkened. Originally, they caught the old priest to threaten Lin Sun, but now Lin Sun also caught Zhongshu, which meant that they were in the same situation. Where are the others except Zhongshu? Xidagarba took a deep breath and asked, You don't need to know this. Just ask me, will you let them go or not? Lin Sun said indifferently. Xidagarba and others looked at each other. It was obvious that they were talking about something by voice transmission. After a while, Xidagarba sighed with a touch of pity on his face. Brother Zhongshu, I'm sorry. In order to capture Lin Sun, we have to do this. This was tantamount to deciding to abandon Zhongshu. Fortunately, Zhongshu was in a coma at the moment. If he saw this scene, no one knew what he would think. Lin Sun, the old priest's life is in our hands. Next, it's up to you to make a choice. If you want him to live, you'd better surrender. If you don't want him to live, we'll kill him immediately. Xidagarba said coldly. He no longer took Zhongshu seriously. Whether the old priest is dead or alive, you should at least let me have a look at him, right? Lin Sun said. Okay. As Xidagarba said, he raised his hand and picked up the old priest. His figure was broken, stained with blood, and he was unconscious. Seeing this, Duso's eyes were bloodshot. He had the best relationship with the old priest. Seeing the miserable situation of the old priest, he felt a pain in his heart. Now, it's time for you to make a choice. Xidagarba looked cold. I'll exchange the 4 of them for the old priest. If you don't agree, you can kill the old priest. But I can guarantee that you will all beg for death. Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and the suppressed figures of Feiya, Xiao Yunzi, and Ba Ju also emerged. Seeing this, Xidagarba and the others all changed their faces. They thought that only Zhongshu was captured by Lin Sun, so after discussion, they decided to give up Zhongshu in exchange for a chance to threaten Lin Sun. But who would have thought that Lin Sun suppressed all 4 of their companions? It was a little hard for them to believe. How could a young man who had just arrived in the bound of universe do this? And Duso was doomed to be unable to do this. Lin Sun said again, My patience is limited. I need a reply after 3 breaths. The atmosphere also became extremely depressing at this moment. Xidagarba and the other 4 looked uncertain, and they all looked like they wanted to eat Lin Sun. Until the time of 3 breaths was almost up, Xidagarba gritted his teeth and said, We can agree to exchange, but there is a condition. Lin Sun interrupted him directly. Either exchange or fight directly. Don't even think about making any more conditions. He seemed extremely powerful. Du So gritted his teeth. He also knew that Lin Sun's approach was the wisest in the current situation. In any case, he couldn't be controlled by others. Even if he had to sacrifice the old priest, Xidagarba and the others' faces became more and more gloomy. Lin Sun's strength was far beyond their expectations. Okay, exchange. Xidagarba's voice was squeezed out from his teeth. After you, and I leave the hostages here, retreat to the distance and let them return on their own. Lin Sun said without thinking. As he said, he threw Zhongshu and the other three to the ground and lifted the imprisonment force on them, letting them wake up one by one. Seeing this, Xidagarba also threw the old priest to the ground. Seeing the old priest wake up, Lin Sun said, "Now, let's all retreat and let them return to their camps on their own." Retreat. With a livid face, Xidagarba waved his hand and ordered everyone to retreat. Immediately, Lin Sun and Du So also retreated. At this time, Zhongshu and the old priest had already understood the situation in front of them. Although they were excited, they also knew that there must be no trouble at this time. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. Immediately, the old priest and Zhongshu all took action. Lin Sun, Xidagarba, and the others confronted each other in the distance, waiting. When the old priest approached, Zhongshu and the others also came to Xidagarba's side. No accident happened. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun brought the old priest to his side, and Xidagarba and the others also saved Zhongshu and the others. There were no hostages in their hands, and the originally oppressive atmosphere was also broken at this moment. Lin Sun, you all deserve to die, Xidagarba shouted, and his chi rose to the sky crazily. His anger was burning. The others around him also stopped holding back. One by one, their chi soared to the sky, and they did not hide their killing intent. However, when they were about to take action, Zhongshu shouted anxiously, "Run, run. Lin Sun is not our opponent at all." Xidagarba and the others were stunned and caught off guard. They did not expect that it was Zhongshu who stopped them. "Run." Then, Feiya, Xiao Yunzi, and Ba Ju also shouted, their faces full of anxiety. This made Xidagarba and the others tremble inexplicably, and they realized that something was wrong. If it was only Zhongshu who said that, they would not feel anything. However, when the four of them stopped them together, there was a problem. Could it be that Lin Sun suppressed all of you previously? Xidagarba's expression changed suddenly. They had suspected it before, but they did not dare to believe it. But now, all of this seemed to be proving their suspicions true. Zhongshu and the others nodded repeatedly. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun, who was in the distance, said coldly, "In this bound universe, even if you want to escape, where can you escape to?" His voice was still echoing, and he had already stepped into the air. Boom! At this moment, Lin Sun completely exploded. His cultivation was controlled by the power of universe, and it turned into an invisible world, covering the endless mountains and rivers in an instant. In the bound of universe, various civilizations appeared, and countless great ways emerged. It was vast and boundless, as if many epochs had gathered together and descended into this world. That scene also made Xidagarba and the other scalps numb, and their faces changed in horror. What a terrifying power of universe. They finally understood why Zhongshu and the others were so anxious to stop them from taking action. At this extremely dangerous moment, Xidagarba and the others were greatly stimulated. They all ran their cultivation with all their might, and a terrifying bound of universe emerged from their bodies. They did not want to fight Lin Sun head-on, but to escape. Chapter 33:02. A shocking scene unfolded before their eyes. In the void, the world of heaven and earth appeared one after another, extremely bright and vast. Each of them carried a civilization and various great ways, and all kinds of phenomena and spirits emerged. It was like the condensation of many epochs. This was the way of heaven and earth, condensing the chi of heaven and earth, thus promoting the transformation of one's own great way, deducing the supreme power of carrying civilization in great ways. Mastering such power was no different from being the master of an epic. At this time, with the desperate efforts of the five messengers, the five world of heaven and earth released by them could be said to be extremely terrifying. As far as they were concerned, this strike was sufficient to open up a path for them to escape from this expanse of the heavens and the earth. Yes, it was only for the sake of escaping. But the next moment, boom, a world of heaven and earth shattered with a bang. It was like a vast world was withering away at this moment, and the civilization and the grand Tao it carried were falling apart and disintegrating. Puff! Cloud Traveler coughed up blood as if he had been struck by lightning. This was his world of heaven and earth, the embodiment of his cultivation. But at this moment, it was completely shattered and destroyed, causing his cultivation to be seriously damaged. How was this possible? Cloud Traveler looked up and saw the world of heaven and earth of heaven and earth of heaven. Do Tianyuan, Shan Tu, and Lu Yao also suffered a heavy blow at this moment. Boom, 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 boom. Rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth resounded as one world of heaven and earth after another exploded like bubbles. A magnificent and resplendent rain of light rose up and swept out like a torrent. No one was a match for Lin Sun's world of heaven and earth. They were all shattered in one blow. That scene was like an epic being smashed by a heavy hammer. All of a sudden, Cloud Traveler was completely stunned. Looking at Xidagarba, Do Tianyuan, and others, they all staggered and coughed up blood. They all suffered great injuries, and their aura was disordered and dispirited. Their faces were full of horror, and they screamed again and again. Their state of mind had been greatly impacted. With the power of one person, Lin Sun destroyed their world of heaven and earth in one blow. This was so horrible that it completely subverted their imagination. The old priest could not help but be stunned and gasp. He could not believe his eyes at all. Isn't it exciting? Looking at the dull look of the old priest, he thought of his stupid fuss when Lin Sun suppressed Zhongshu and others. I've already said that we were going to retreat. Why did you delay? Zhongsu, Baju, and the others had just escaped from death, but when they saw this scene, they couldn't help but feel despair. All of them looked as if they had lost their parents, and their hearts were like ashes. Boom! The smoke and clouds in the sky dissipated. Under the sky, Lin Sun stood alone, overlooking those heavily injured messengers of destiny, and asked, "Do you want to try again?" Xidagarba and others raised their heads with difficulty and looked at Lin Sun. Their pale faces were full of confusion and fear. No one could imagine how Lin Sun, who had just arrived in the bounded universe, could master such a terrifying way of universe. Even though he had been defeated, his heart was filled with indescribable confusion. How could this be? Seeing that no one answered, Lin Sun felt dispirited. Well, let me send you off. Boom! The sky was full of light and turned into the bound of universe. At this moment, Xidagarba and others had no strength to struggle at all. They could only watch themselves being swallowed up like tiny ants. So far, the 9 messengers of destiny in this world had all died. In the distance, Do So and the old priest were in a trance. They had fought with those messengers of destiny for many years. Every time, they almost had to flee in embarrassment, and they also encountered great danger many times. Naturally, they were all very clear about the strength of those messengers of destiny. But such a group of powerful beings was killed by Lin Sun in the blink of an eye, which made Do So and the old priest feel like they were in a dream. Suddenly, Lin Sun's voice sounded, "Seniors, you'd better recover quickly. Don't leave any hidden dangers." Do So and the old priest looked up and saw Lin Sun walking over in the air. Dressed in a white robe, Lin Sun was as handsome as when he was young. But in the eyes of Do So and the old priest, this young man was enough for them to look up to. In mysterious God realm, Pei Tu, Qin Yangzi, Shu He, and the other lords of destiny remained silent. The atmosphere in the hall was extremely oppressive. It hasn't even been 5 years since Lin Sun entered the ruins of Dao, right? After a long time, Pei Tu muttered with a low voice. He has already passed through the 8th level of the door of heaven and seized the chaotic Dao fruit 8 times. If nothing unexpected happens, then it won't be long before he'll leave the bound of universe to traverse the path of severing. His voice revealed an indescribably complicated feeling. In the beginning, they didn't care about Lin Sun at all, and they took him to be prey that was at their mercy. Later on, as Lin Sun traversed those heaven realms over and over again, it caused them to be furious, shocked, vigilant, and they suffered blows over and over again. Up until now, every single one of their hearts felt cold. They were completely deterred by the might Lin Sun revealed. No matter how unwilling they were to accept it, they had no choice but to admit that Lin Sun wasn't inferior to them, the boundless Dao Lords, and he might even surpass them. The path of severing is to sever the Daos of the past, present, and future. I wonder if this path of severing that has a slim chance of survival can trap Lin Sun. Qin Yangzi let out a long sigh. They didn't have any confidence in their hearts, and they didn't have the arrogance and confidence they had in the past any longer. So, their brows knit together tightly while their hearts were heavy when they talked about Lin Sun. This was something that had never happened in the past. It's useless for us to speak about all of this now, and we're unable to interfere or obstruct Lin Sun's footsteps any longer. We can only wait here passively. Shu He's voice revealed a wisp of an indescribable sense of loss. The cruelest part is that if he has the chance to traverse the path of severing and arrive at the profound God domain, then we'll probably be unable to be a match for him, even if we join forces. A strand of pessimism spread and fermented within these Destiny Dao Lords, and the expressions of every single one of them were extremely gloomy. This is the variable that the Sect Master was waiting for. I seem to understand why the young Miss and Sect Master didn't make a clear stand since the beginning. They probably expected that a mere spirit's domain would be unable to obstruct Lin Sun's footsteps. Tianshu muttered, "We can only blame ourselves for not understanding the situation. We thought that mobilizing all our forces to obstruct and attack Lin Sun meant that we were working for the Sect Master and the young Mississippi. But in the end, we suffered heavy casualties. How ridiculous!" Everyone's expressions were slightly unsightly, and different thoughts surged in their hearts. Yes, why hadn't the Sect Master and the young Miss made a stand since Lin Sun appeared? Could it be that they had expected that Lin Sun's momentum was unstoppable? Or perhaps they wanted to watch coldly from the sidelines and see if this variable, Lin Sun, could reach the profound God domain? After a while, Pei Tu said in a low voice, "The Sect Master's heart is as deep as the sea, and it's far from what we can speculate. It's enough for us to do what we should do." Right at this moment, Ape Ancestor's figure that was as tall as a mountain appeared out of thin air outside the hall, and his aged voice resounded. "All of you follow me." Pei Tu and the others stood up in unison and looked at each other in confusion. "May I ask where we're going, Lord Ape Ancestor?" Pei Tu cupped his hands and said, "To the profound Dao platform to see if Lin Sun can traverse the path of severing and arrive at the profound God domain." As Ape Ancestor spoke, he had already turned around and rushed forward. Pei Tu and the others were shocked at first, and then they all showed excitement. Even Ape Ancestor couldn't sit still. Was he finally going to make a move? While thinking, they had already started to move and followed Ape Ancestor. Ape Ancestor is moving. In a hidden world, Golden Cicada sensed something and couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. It's a little hasty to make a move at this time. Ape Ancestor has been with Tai Chu for a long time, like a servant and a friend. His path towards the Tao fused the energies of clear and turbid, yin and yang, and the two polarities into one, and it developed the divine aura of Tai Chi that had attained perfection. The rarest part of it all was that his attainments in the Tao were completely cultivated bitterly by himself, and even absolute beginning didn't give him much help. Mountain Master Fonsuin said in a light voice, fellow Taoist ought to be clearly aware that in the various epochs since the ancient times until now, there have been countless formidable figures that have cultivated the Tai Chi Tao. However, only the ape ancestor has attained the ultimate perfection realm in this Tao. Golden Cicada smiled and said, "The Tao of Tai Chi is a combination of hardness and softness, carrying yin and yang, one movement and one stillness, all seeking perfection. Taoist friend, do you think that ape ancestor's action this time is prepared and not a hasty move?" "It must be so," Master Fontaine said. "In other words, when ape ancestor makes a move, there will be changes, and these changes may be what Tai Chu wants to see." "So, Taoist friend, you don't intend to make a move?" Golden Cicada was startled. Master Fontaine thought for a moment and answered, "Let nature take its course." "Grandfather, ape ancestor is moving. Is that old guy finally unable to hold back?" In the primordial spirit world, Chun Lin Kong's eyes lit up. "Even you know what he's doing. How can he not know the changes that will be caused by his actions?" A clear voice came from the thatched hut. "Don't be anxious. Everyone can see ape ancestor's actions. It doesn't matter whether he's doing it intentionally, planning to preemptively attack, or setting up a diversion. As long as Tai Chu doesn't make a move, this game is far from starting." Chun Ling Kong raised an eyebrow. "Grandfather, you only have eyes for Tai Chu, but I'm worried about young friend Lin's situation. Why don't I go to the profound Tao platform as well?" After a moment of silence, the voice from the thatched hut sounded again. "You can go and have a look." Chun Ling Kong was overjoyed and turned to leave. He had long been thinking about making a move. Such a temperament is not comparable to Golden Cicada and Pewdie, but it doesn't matter. Each has his own Tao, and each has his own temperament. Whether they are determined to make progress or calm as a mountain, they are different after all. In the thatched hut, the handsome figure was lost in thought. As for Lin's son, although he hasn't tried to cut the Tao, his cultivation should be better than his master now. In this regard, Pewdie is worthy of being a man of great courage. Although he has paid a great price, it is enough to make him feel gratified and proud to have such a successor. Chapter 3303. In a chaotic world, Black Crow hesitated for a long time, but he couldn't help but ask, "Sect Master, did you ask Ape Ancestor to act now?" Deep underground, the absolute beginning ruler's voice sounded. "Little Crow, how many variables do you think Ape Ancestor's action will cause?" Black Crow pondered. "The current situation in the profound God region will affect everything. Once Ape Ancestor moves, it will definitely attract the attention of Chun Shi, Golden Cicada, Sub Hoodie, Chun Linkong, and the others. I just don't know if they will act now. If that's the case, Ape Ancestor will be in danger." "Wrong," the Primordium Sovereign said. "Only when the Ape Ancestor makes a move will he be able to activate the entire chessboard. As for the Ape Ancestor, he'll be fine. This was all part of my plan. If those opponents don't make a move, then when Lin Sun reaches the profound God domain, he'll definitely be surrounded by the Ape Ancestor and his people. If they move, it will naturally be even better." Black Crow seemed to realize something and said excitedly, "Sect Master, do you already have the power to escape? It depends on whether it's worth it for me to get out of trouble when Lin Sun arrives." The absolute ruler's voice carried a hint of secrecy. "If it's not worth it, then my efforts will have been wasted." Black Crow's heart trembled. Could it be that Sect Master already had a plan? "Let me ask you, in your opinion, between us and our opponents in the profound God domain, who is stronger and who is weaker?" The absolute beginning ruler asked. "From the looks of it, we are evenly matched," Black Crow said softly. The only one in the profound God region who could threaten the absolute beginning ruler was Chun Shi. Sub Hoodie, Golden Cicada, and Chun Linkong were slightly weaker. After all, the four of them only had the cultivation of the boundless ruler. However, on their side, only Shi and Ape Ancestor had the cultivation of the boundless ruler. In this level, they were slightly inferior. But in Black Crow's opinion, just the Sect Master alone was enough to threaten all of them. Even if the Sect Master was trapped, it was enough to intimidate them. Otherwise, Why hadn't Chun-Shi and Subhuti made a move during these countless years? The reason was that they were extremely afraid of the sect master's existence. As for the boundless ruler's level, they had the 9 divisions of absolute beginning, the 2 founders of the shaman cult and Zen cult. On the other hand, there were only the origin sect patriarch and the spirit sect patriarch. Of course, in Heiya's eyes, figures at the level of the immeasurable Tao Lord didn't have the qualifications to participate in the competition between the experts of the profound God region. Evenly matched, the Primordium sovereign couldn't help but laugh. There was an indescribable feeling in his voice, as if he was mocking himself, but also as if he felt that this was a joke. Black Crow, on the other hand, heard another meaning from this laughter and couldn't help but say, "Sect Master, could it be that you already have the confidence to win?" The Primordium Hegemon said calmly, "Sure to win?" It was hard to say. You think it's a situation where we're evenly matched, but as far as Chun-Shi and Subhuti are concerned, so long as a variable like Lin Sun arrives, then it would be sufficient to cause me to suffer a crushing defeat in this game. Then what does Sect Master think? Black Crow asked. The Primordium Hegemon said, "Know yourself and know your enemy. Only then can you win 100 battles. Right now, I know all the details about my opponent like the back of my hand. The only one that can threaten me is Chun-Shi." His voice was casual, as if he was stating a fact. The Primordium Hegemon paused for a moment and continued. "The only thing I can't be sure of is the variable that is Lin Sun. However, the ape ancestor has already set out, and the show will begin once Lin Sun truly arrives." Black Crow really wanted to ask exactly what sort of show it was, but he restrained himself in the end. He was very clearly aware that the sect master was bound to be unable to reveal the secrets of the show before it began. Chun-Shi, Chun-Shi. Suddenly, the Primordium Hegemon muttered, "If you want to stop him, then you probably won't have the chance." Black Crow's heart shook as he guessed a possibility. The sect master's plans were something that even a supreme existence like Chun-Shi would find very difficult to deal with. "Little Crow, just you wait. Once this variable, Lin Sun, arrives, and once this game comes to an end, I'll send both you and the ape ancestor to the forbidden area of profundity." The Primordium Hegemon's voice gradually lowered and vanished, and then there was no further sound. On the other hand, Black Crow's heart rose and fell, and he found it difficult to calm down. Half a month later, the universe, a clear stream gurgled within a verdant forest. The path of severance severed the Tao of the past, present, and future, and it's extremely dangerous. Since ancient times until now, only a small group of people have traversed it. Dussault drank as he spoke. "However, I haven't traversed it as well, so I don't know what sort of dangers I'll encounter when I step onto the path of severance." The old priest said, "I heard that once one traverses the path of severance, one's cultivation will transform into the true Tao of chaos." Lin Sun was stunned, and then he said, "So that's how it is. When the chaos was split apart, the world was revealed. The world could bear the weight of civilization and the grand Tao, and in this way, it could develop the phenomena and spirits of the world. On the other hand, cultivation was a process of tracing back to the source. For example, from the most superficial Tao aura and Tao insight to the laws of longevity, Saint Tao laws, Emperor Realm laws, eternal laws, all the way until one comprehended the eternal laws. This step-by-step understanding and control of the Grand Tao was a process of tracing back to the essence and source from the surface to the inside. After reaching the boundless realm, the chaos laws grasped in the ruins of wonderful Tao were ultimately a step further in understanding the essence of the Grand Tao. For example, the origin power of heaven and earth comprehended and mastered in the universe was essentially a transformation of the Grand Tao that one mastered. What was a step further than the path of heaven and earth was the true chaos. At that time, one's Grand Tao would transform into the chaos, which was undoubtedly equivalent to touching the most primitive essence of the Tao. My young friend, those old guys in the mystic god realm are waiting for you to go there. Well, what do you think? Du So couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun thought for a while and smiled. I seek my own Tao. Du So and the old priest looked at each other and couldn't help but feel emotional. This wasn't fearlessness, nor was it indifference, but it was a determination in his heart. Then when do you plan to leave this universe? Du So asked. He didn't doubt that Lin Sun couldn't leave this world at all. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, wait a little longer. In this half a month, he had already completely refined his cultivation into the way of heaven and earth and reached the state of perfection. He could leave at any time. The reason why he didn't leave was that he was waiting for Xia Ji. Young brother, I still think that it's most appropriate for Miss Xia Ji to stay here. Not to mention the dangers of severing one's path. Merely entering the profound God domain would bring about numerous unpredictable dangers and killing tribulations. Under such circumstances, it would be too dangerous to allow Miss Xia Ji to follow us. The old priest couldn't help saying. Lin Sun shook his head with a smile. I might have done this in the past, but not now. What's more, even if I wanted to let her stay, she would never agree. Xia Ji, who had been silent all this time, also opened her mouth at this moment and said naturally, Lin Sun has promised me that we will advance and retreat together, live and die together. Seeing this, the old priest stopped persuading him. Time passed day after day. Xia Ji had been cultivating in seclusion, condensing the qi of heaven and earth. Lin Sun was sitting in silence, and his qi was still. In his sea of consciousness, there are all kinds of incredible grand Tao being deduced. Creation, fate, the 5 sequences of the ruins of end. These grand Tao were all fused into the nirvana profundity, and the nirvana profundity was changing along with it and developing infinite mysteries. As early as the spiritual endowed world and the gate of eternity, Lin Sun had completely understood that the reason why he was regarded as a variable was related to the nirvana profundity. Nirvana was a mysterious power that could reshape life and transform it. Possessing such power was like mastering the means of rebirth of a phoenix or breaking out of a cocoon to become a butterfly. What it achieved was the change of life. The way of life was regarded as a higher path than the eternal way, and it was also a grand Tao that existences like Chan Shi and Tai Chu had been pursuing. The power of nirvana was related to the transformation of life, so it was naturally extremely shocking. With Lin Sun's current cultivation, he already understood that the essence of the nirvana profundity lay in the word change. It could reshape the grand Tao and transform life. Such a variable naturally had the possibility to break everything in the past and subvert the cognition of the world. These days, Lin Sun had been meditating and deducing the mystery of nirvana, and had tried to integrate the mystery of spirit endowing source into nirvana. The quintessence of spirit bestowal was capable of giving birth to countless innate abilities in the world, whereas innate abilities were related to life, and it was equivalent to being related to the profundities of the Tao of life. A long time ago, the primordium ruler had entered the gate of eternity's spirit bestowment realm and comprehended and controlled this spirit bestowment power. It was also from this that Lin Sun determined that the absolute beginning sovereign had long come into contact with the threshold of the Tao of life. His cultivation had also long since been destined to be incomparable to those at the great circle of the boundless realm. On the other hand, Lin Sun, who had mastered the mystery of the source of endowed spirit, had already touched the threshold of the way of life. Moreover, the profundities of rebirth he'd grasped were capable of urging living beings to undergo transformation and rebirth, and this was no different from grasping a grand Tao energy related to the grand Tao of life. In the past, he was limited by his cultivation, so it was very difficult for him to figure out the secrets of rebirth. But now, as he stepped into the great circle of the boundless realm and came into contact with some profundities of the way of life, his understanding of the profundities of nirvana had a great breakthrough. Just like in these days, when he tried to integrate the profundities of spirit bestowal into the profundities of nirvana, the profundities of nirvana that he'd mastered easily and thoroughly integrated with the profundities of spirit bestowal. And in the process of integration, the power of nirvana also underwent a great change, which made Lin Sun's cultivation also undergo a subtle change. That kind of change was very hard to describe. It was as if he'd broken the shackles of his own nature and soul, and was no longer fettered by the realm and the grand Tao. As long as the profundities of nirvana kept getting stronger, his cultivation and life would constantly transform. Of course, this was just Lin Sun's feeling. He didn't know what such a subtle change meant, because in the years since ancient times, the boundless realm was the ultimate realm. The subtle changes produced in this realm hadn't been defined and named by people at all. There weren't even records or legends about it. In other words, all this was like unknown. But Lin Sun was sure that such subtle changes must be related to the way of life. 3 consecutive updates first. There's more in the evening, in addition, thanks to Brother Giadaleo for the monthly ticket reward. Chapter 3304. The grand completion boundless realm was the pinnacle of the eternal Tao path, and also the pinnacle of the path that the world already knew. Is there really a higher path above the eternal path of the Tao? This was still an unsolvable problem in the eyes of the vast majority of boundless realm figures. But in Lin Sun's opinion, he was sure that if there was a path that was superior to the eternal path, then it was definitely the life Tao, because he had also touched this threshold. Moreover, unlike the others, it seemed to be extremely easy for him to encounter this threshold, and he didn't encounter any difficulty or obstruction at all. He didn't have to be like the absolute beginning sovereign who bitterly probed the profound God domain for 100,000 years and experienced 100,000 years of failure before finally discovering the existence of the spirit endowment world from the eternal vessel that flashed out of the forbidden area of profundity. From there, he came into contact with the profundities of the Tao of life from the spirit endowment quintessence. In the final analysis, Lin Sun had touched the mystery of life a long time ago because he had mastered the nirvana ultimacy. For example, when he saved his disciple, Tang Jiang, it was actually a kind of nirvana for life. It was the same when he saved eldest senior brother. It was merely because he was limited by his cultivation that he didn't know the relationship between the nirvana profundity and the life Tao. Yet now, in the ultimate realm of the boundless realm, when he fused the profundity of spirit creation into the profundity of nirvana and sensed the subtle changes in his body, Lin Sun knew that he'd already come into contact with the great Tao that surpassed the eternal Tao in a true sense. That swordsman had once reincarnated in the ruins of Tao. This can be considered a Tao of life. Since Senior Chun, she was able to stand shoulder to shoulder with swordsman in absolute beginning, there's no doubt that he's definitely come into contact with the life Tao. Even the reincarnation of the eternal night divine emperor can be regarded as the embodiment of the way of life. After all, the eternal night divine emperor is a talent born from the spiritual origin, and he himself contains the mysteries of the way of life. While meditating, Lin Sun thought of a lot of things and unraveled many mysteries in his mind. His understanding of nirvana, Tao, and life was undergoing subtle changes. 1 month later, Summer Solstice woke up from meditation. His aura had also undergone a shocking change. Grand completion, boundless realm? Noticing this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help asking. She nodded and said, "That's right." Lin Sun suddenly laughed. "Even the eternal night emperor in those days is far inferior to you now. Isn't that why she wanted to reincarnate?" Summer Solstice said, "It's just that she cut off her own memories and experiences to make me who I am now." Lin Sun agreed and asked, "Can I leave now? It should be fine." Shi stood up while the way of heaven and earth gushed out from her body, and it transformed into a boundless world of eternal darkness. The civilization and grand Tao that it carried were like an array of stars that flowed within it, mysterious and profound. No matter how dark the eternal night was, it was unable to conceal the brilliance of those stars. Boom! At this moment, heaven and earth resonated, and all phenomena trembled. Do So and the old priest, who were cultivating not far away, were alerted by the commotion and rushed over. "Are you leaving?" Du So asked. "It's time to leave," Lin Sun said with a smile. "I'll come back later to have a drink with you two seniors." Du So rolled his eyes. "Do you think we have no chance to break through this realm? Just wait. We'll come to you later." The old priest couldn't help laughing. "Good, good." Lin Sun was speechless and said happily, "No matter when you come to see me, I'll be waiting for you. Who wants to sleep in the same bed with you?" Du So said grumpily, "You just need to prepare the wine." Lin Sun was speechless. Immediately, he laughed. Du So's nature and temper were still the same as before. Boom! Heaven and earth roared, and the whole bound of universe produced a strange rhythm. Visible to the naked eye, a piece of fruit of chaos emerged and bathed Xia Yi's graceful and slender figure. The fruit of chaos is attracted so soon. The eyes of Du So and the old priest became subtle. It had only been 2 months since Lin Sun and Xia Yi arrived in the bounded universe. "I'll walk on my own. After arriving at the realm of gods, I'll always wait for you on the platform of gods." Soon, Xia Yi turned her head and looked at Lin Sun. She didn't need Lin Sun to remind her to answer herself. Lin Sun nodded with a smile. Before, he had told Xia Yi to wait on the platform of gods after passing through the path of slashing. The platform of gods was very magical. The practitioners who entered for the first time would be protected by the power of the platform. Even if there was an ambush nearby, they couldn't get close to the platform. On the contrary, once they left, they would never be able to return to the platform of gods. Of course, this news was told to Lin Sun by Du So had mastered a secret method that could appear in the hidden world of gods in a short time to meet the master of the heart core and golden cicada. Unfortunately, this secret method required a great deal of effort and could only be used once every 1,000 years. It was taught by the master of the heart core and was called Worlds and Near at Hand. When Lin Sun first arrived at the ruins of Tao, Du So had already used it once. Therefore, Du So knew some things about the platform of gods. Buzz soon, the gate of heaven appeared, and Xia Yi's figure swept into it and disappeared. "Seniors, I'll be taking my leave as well." Lin Sun turned around and cupped his hands at Du So and the old priest. "Hurry up. Don't let Xia Yi wait for too long," Du So urged. The old priest smiled and said, "I'm looking forward to the resonance of heaven and earth when you leave." Lin Sun smiled and said no more. Taking a deep breath, he lifted his foot and stepped forward. An invisible door emerged, and when Lin Sun's foot fell, he stepped into the door. Then, his figure and the door disappeared together. This casual and simple scene made the Du So and the old priest look at each other. They couldn't help but feel caught off guard. Did he just leave like this? Where was the resonance of heaven and earth? Where was the fruit of chaos? Why did they all disappear? After a long time, the old priest calmed down and said, "Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. Such a unique way of leaving is appropriate for Lin Sun." Du So let out a long sigh and said, "It's better to meet him less in the future. Otherwise, my Taoist heart will be full of holes." The old priest couldn't help but feel sad. At this moment, both of them had guessed that Lin Sun had probably obtained the fruit of chaos a long time ago and possessed the qualification to leave the bound of universe. That was why he could leave so casually at this moment. On this day, Lin Sun, who had entered the ruins of wonders for less than 5 years, passed through the 9 heavenly gates of the soul's god realm and left. In a boundless void, a path condensed from the origin of chaos ran through it, and it stretched towards the depths, severing the path. In the past eras, there was no lack of people who had passed through the 9 heavenly gates of the soul's god realm, but in the end, they lost their lives on this severing path and were unable to reach the mystery god realm. This was the most taboo and terrifying path. Taking a step on it and severing the Tao of the past, present, and future, even the Tao lords and hegemons in the boundless realm had a slim chance of survival. Swoosh! Lin Sun's figure appeared out of thin air. Is this the severing path? Lin Sun sensed with his divine sense, but he only felt an illusory chaos, and he couldn't feel anything else. Looks like I have to take a step on it in order to sense its profundities. As he thought, Lin Sun had already taken a step forward, and his figure floated down onto the severing path. In an instant, the scene before Lin Sun's eyes changed abruptly. He seemed as if he was going back in the river of life, and the strange and dazzling scenes of the past flashed before his eyes. After an unknown period of time, when Lin Sun's field of vision became clear, he saw that all the scenes of his past had converged into a river that was reflected in the distant void. The river of my past? Lin Sun's pupils constricted. This scene was extremely similar to the river he saw when he looked back in the origin world, and it reflected everything he'd experienced in the past. Wait, but in next to no time, Lin Sun noticed that it was different. At this moment, all the scenes and experiences of his past that were reflected in the river of the past were covered in an obscure and mysterious aura of calamity. In the end, everything in the past was completely drowned by the torrent of calamity. Understand now, this is the river of calamity that represents the past. In other words, the so-called calamity of severing the Tao. Lin Sun came to a sudden understanding. Right when he thought of this, boom, a bolt of chaotic thunder swept out of the river and rushed towards Lin Sun. There was no way to avoid it, because this kind of chaotic thunder had already transcended the shackles of time and space. No matter where Lin Sun was, he would be hit by it. Lin Sun didn't intend to avoid it. When this bolt of chaotic thunder hit Lin Sun's body, it didn't produce much destructive power. But in Lin Sun's mind, he felt as if he was stabbed by a sharp knife. Everything went black in front of Lin's eyes, and he immediately felt that he had turned into a baby lying in swaddling clothes. What appeared in front of him was the handsome face of Yun Qingbai, who was holding a sharp-boned saber stained with blood in his hand. And Lin Sun's chest had been cut open, dripping with blood. Did I go back to the time when I was just born? When he realized this, Lin Sun didn't panic, because he was too familiar with such a scene. It was the murder that happened in Lin family a long time ago. At that time, Yun Qingbai sneaked into Lin family with Ba Qi in order to dig away the spiritual vein in Lin Sun's body. All this is real, not a false illusion. It just happened in my past life, just like what I saw in the long river of the tracing world. And what I feel now is the power of the chaotic thunder. No. Is this calamity going to erase me in my past life? Lin Sun's heart trembled when he thought of this. He had entered the tracing world and knew that in the long river of life, practitioners could change their past fate. On the contrary, what he was experiencing now was a calamity of severing the Tao appearing in his past life to erase him in the past. P.S. There's more before 11 p.m. Chapter 3305. The most terrible thing was that all of this was real. Once Lin Sun was in trouble, he would definitely die. Now, he would also meet a calamity and die. Just when he thought of this, Yun Qingbai, who was holding the bone saber, suddenly stabbed at his throat. At this time, Lin Sun was a fragile baby lying in swaddling clothes. How could he block it? At this critical moment, Lin Sun suddenly realized one thing. The baby in swaddling clothes was his past self after all. The reason why he could sense all this was that he was affected and impacted by the tribulation of Tao cutting. In the final analysis, he had to rely on his present self to resolve this tribulation. In the twinkling of an eye, Yun Qingbai's machete was about to stab the baby to death. However, a big hand appeared at this moment and firmly grasped Yun Qingbai's wrist, so that his machete was about to stab into Lin Sun's throat. The owner of the big hand was Ba Qi, the quasi-emperor, but at this moment, Ba Qi was under the control of Lin Sun. Bang! Ba Qi waved his hand and slapped Yun Qingbai away. At this moment, everything in front of Lin Sun suddenly disappeared like a bubble. But before he could react, his figure appeared in the mind prison and turned into his younger self. It was a simple room with a desk, a bed, and some spiritual materials needed to practice spiritual tattoos. A dim yellow oil lamp shone mottled light in the room. Lin Sun was very familiar with this scene. However, his expression changed. If the power of the tribulation of Tao cutting appeared on Master Lu, he He would not be able to save himself from death with his current strength. Thinking of this, Lin Sun suddenly kicked the door open and ran away in the distance with his thin figure. Soon, the entrance of a mine tunnel appeared in Lin Sun's sight. It was Master Lu who threw him into the mine tunnel and let him out of the mine prison. The reason was that there was a transmission formation under the tunnel, which was arranged by Master Lu himself. Without hesitation, Lin Sun jumped into it. Boom! Almost as soon as Lin Sun's figure disappeared, a horrible breath rushed from a distance. It was Lu Boya. He rushed into the mine tunnel as soon as possible. However, he was a step too late. With a roar, the transmission formation in the depths of the mine tunnel operated and disappeared with Lin Sun. He had escaped this calamity. The picture in front of Lin Sun suddenly collapsed. When his vision became clear, he was already in a room in the courtyard of Feiyun village. With the previous two experiences, Lin Sun immediately concluded that Xia Ji was likely to face the Tao cutting tribulation this time. The battle prowess that Xia Ji possessed back then was not something that he could withstand at all. Lin Sun took a deep breath and made a decision almost immediately. He went straight forward and locked the door. Then he skillfully found an old wooden box in a room, took out the inscribing pen and notes, bit his fingertip, and dipped a drop of blood into the notes. Bang! The locked door was broken, and Xia Ji rushed in directly. The white bone spear in her hand was already stabbing at Lin Sun with terrible sharpness. His speed was so fast that it was terrifying, but this blow missed the target. The inscribing pen and notes merged and turned into the heaven-accessing place, bringing the figure of Lin Sun in his youth into it. The tribulation also dissipated. Until now, Lin Sun understood. The tribulation of Tao, cutting tribulation at this moment, was aimed at his past self. This tribulation could appear on anyone in the past, including friends, relatives, and enemies. And now, he was standing on the road of Tao, cutting tribulation. There were only two ways to stop it. One was to deal with it with the power of his past self. The other was to use the power of his present self to stop it with the power of his past self. For example, when dealing with Yin Qingbai, his present self used Ba Qi to stop Yin Qingbai. It was worth mentioning that Ba Qi could be used, because he was also in that scene at that time. But no matter which way he chose, he must be decisive to find a way out of the desperate situation caused by the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation. For example, in the mine prison, in order to avoid being killed by Lu Boya, choosing to leave through the mine prison's teleportation formation was the only way out. Otherwise, it would be easy for Lu Boya to kill him at that time. In the residence of Feiyun village, Xia Ji was in the courtyard. The only way out was the heaven-accessing place. It could be said that in these three fatal tribulations, if Lin Sun acted a little slower, his past self would be killed by the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation. After understanding this, Lin Sun became calmer. Standing on the road, he began to deduce all his past experiences, analyze the possible fatal tribulations in these experiences, and find a way out, and his past self encountered the fatal tribulations again. In Xiao Empire, he met Granddad Zhong on the night when he set foot on heart-cleansing peak of Lin family for the first time. As soon as he saw his situation, Lin Sun turned around and fled. Granddad Zhong chased after him. On the way, Lin Sun was seriously injured and almost killed several times, but he finally got close to the destination, Star Observatory. Boom! The old priest appeared and killed Granddad Zhong in the air. Of course, the old priest was controlled by the present Lin Sun and killed the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation, which was incarnated as Granddad Zhong. In the following time, the tribulations of Tao cutting tribulation appeared in Lin Sun's past life one after another. Every time, Lin Sun almost fell into a desperate situation. For example, on the way to the ultimate land for the first time when he was young, the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation directly turned into Elder Gao Yang, an elder of Zhao Jingshuan's sect at that time. Lin Sun escaped from Gao Yang by taking advantage of the army of resentful souls in the Soul Oblivion Sea. For example, in the Star Chest Sea of the Ancient Desolation, the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation turned into she. And at that time, she had a terrifying combat power far beyond that of the ancient desolation at present. Fortunately, Lin Sun hid in the heaven-accessing place and avoided this terrible, killing tribulation. Similar scenes like this were innumerable, and every single one of them was filled with danger and boundlessly terrifying. But gradually, Lin Sun adapted to all this, and the present Lin Sun had deduced all the places where there might be fatal tribulations in his past experience and found a way out. This allowed him, who had passed, to be able to easily deal with dangerous situations when he encountered them again. In the following time, the tribulations of Tao cutting tribulation appeared in the starry sky ancient path, the dark world, the Kiliakosm battle domain, the eternal world, the ruins of creation, the Kunlun ruins. On the other hand, Lin Sun became more and more proficient in dealing with them. When Lin Sun headed to the ruins of Tao, this killing tribulation came to an end. Lin Sun's consciousness and mind had completely recovered. He was still on the path of Tao cutting tribulation, but Lin Sun had a strange feeling. After experiencing countless killing tribulations, it seemed as if he'd severed all the karma of the past. It was like a fetter. The Tao of severing the past is actually severing the karma of the past. In this way, even if an enemy tries to trace back to the past to deal with my past self, they won't be able to find a chance to do so. At this moment, Lin Sun understood. This was called severing the past. It wasn't severing past experiences, but the karma of the past, so no matter who it was, they would be unable to shake or destroy his past life. At the same time, Lin Sun felt that the power of the Great Way in his body had undergone an astonishing change at this moment, and all of them were suffused with obscure and vague chaotic charm. However, it was only a part of it, and it hadn't completely transformed into the Great Way of chaos. But such a transformation still refreshed Lin Sun's spirit. As the old priest said, on the path of Tao cutting tribulation, there was a chance for his cultivation to transform into the Great Way of chaos. Boom! A muffled thunder suddenly sounded in the void in the distance. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly widened. In the void, a tall figure came. He was dressed in moon-white clothes, and his long black hair fell to his waist. Whether it was his appearance, his temperament, or even his cultivation, they were exactly the same as Lin Sun. Just like Lin Sun in the mirror. When he saw this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be awestruck. This was an illusion. It was the real him. He could even feel the fluctuation of life in this person. Is this the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation for this world? Lin Sun frowned. Not far away, Lin Sun stood in the void and said with a smile, "I'll be you if I kill you. You'll be me if you kill me." This sentence seemed very baffling, and there was a sense of contradiction in it. Lin Sun suddenly calmed down at this moment and said, "There can't be two people who are exactly the same in this world. I'm destined not to be you, and you're destined not to be me." Looking at the Lin Sun opposite him, Lin Sun himself felt extremely strange and extremely repulsed, as if his own existence had been unprecedentedly offended. This made him extremely uncomfortable. "No, you and I have the same cultivation, the same appearance, the same temperament. I'm you in this world, and you're me in this world." In the distance, Lin Sun said indifferently, "Your rejection of me in your heart means that you're rejecting yourself. I'm not rejecting myself, but I'm rejecting something like you that's transformed from the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation." As he spoke, Lin Sun stepped forward and suddenly punched out. In the distance, Lin Sun stood in the void without dodging, and his figure was directly smashed by the fist energy. But at the same time, Lin Sun coughed up a mouthful of blood as if the strength of this punch had hit him. Compared to this, shock that couldn't be concealed surged up in Lin Sun's heart. Could that fellow really be me? Otherwise, why is it that I'm the one who's injured when my punch clearly hits him? But if that's the case, then who am I? At this moment in the distant void, Lin Sun's figure had condensed once more, and he said indifferently, "Don't you understand? You're me, and I'm you. You'll only kill yourself by doing this." It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even if Xie Ji, who had been by Lin Sun's side all these years, was here, she probably wouldn't be able to distinguish the real Lin Sun. At this moment, Lin Sun took a deep breath and suddenly smiled. He pointed at the position of his heart and said, "Unfortunately, you're transformed from the tribulation of Tao cutting after all. Even if you possess the aura of life, you can't possess a true state of mind." The fifth chapter was delivered. Chapter 3306. State of Mind. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing and said, "You're wrong. You and I are the same, so our state of mind is naturally the same. Of course, it's meaningless to talk about this. In the final analysis, only one of us can survive." As he said, he suddenly raised his hand and pressed his finger in the air. Boom! Endless sword intent emerged and condensed into a sword chi. In the sword chi, there was all the profound meaning of nirvana. Lin Sun was shocked. He was extremely familiar with the power, aura, and presence of the sword. It was something that came from his cultivation in the first place. In other words, besides him, it was utterly impossible for anyone else to execute this strand of sword chi. But now it was displayed by Lin Sun opposite him. How could Lin Sun not be shocked? "Go!" he shouted softly. The voice, eyes, and even the indifferent expression of Lin Sun made Lin Sun feel like looking into a mirror. But before Lin Sun could think more, the sword chi had come. However, when he was about to deal with it, he suddenly found that he seemed to have lost control of his own cultivation and could only watch the sword coming. Puff! Under the sword, Lin Sun was seriously injured. Blood splashed, and his body was cut with a sword mark, which almost cut open his stomach. The injury was very serious. But compared with this, what was more unacceptable was that he was seriously injured by the sword that should have belonged to him. There's no need to struggle. I'll kill you, and I'll be you. In other words, our state of mind, temperament, cultivation, wisdom, and the great Tao are the same. Your death will help me, and it will also help you. Not far away, Lin Sun said indifferently. As he said, he raised his hand and chopped again. Bang! Lin Sun still failed to resist and was destroyed by the sword. His Taoist body was completely broken like a porcelain full of cracks and was about to fall apart. If it were someone else, he would have been defeated by this strange scene and would have fallen into an unbearable sense of collapse. But Lin Sun didn't. He tried hard to recall all the details he had experienced before. One more sword strike, and your Taoist body will be destroyed. Are you still not going to give up? In the distance, Lin Sun frowned slightly. But at this moment, Lin Sun suddenly straightened up his broken and bloody body and said calmly, "I see. Now you don't exist at all. What I'm facing is just a tribulation in my mind." He paused for a moment before a sneer appeared on his face. "Or perhaps you're just a heart tribulation caused by my heart tribulation." On the opposite side, Lin Sun was stunned for a moment and then suddenly laughed. "It's hard to say who will be the one suffering," saying. He pressed his fingers together and slashed with his sword. But at this moment, Lin Sun closed his eyes. All the distracting thoughts disappeared, and all his consciousness returned to his state of mind. The heart is the space of an inch, the place where the spirit lies. Mental states were often the most mysterious and difficult to comprehend. But for Lin Sun, he wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of strength. Moreover, when he was in the mortal transformation realm, he relied on the battle with the karmic Tao idol left behind by his master, the master of the heart core, to temper his state of mind to the state of wandering the heart, connecting the ages. It could be said that in terms of the tempering of the state of mind, no one in this world could be compared with Lin Sun. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that on the path of Tao cutting, the tribulation of Tao cutting would turn into a heart tribulation and launched a surprise attack on him without him noticing it at all. But now that he had completely come to his senses, he naturally had a solution. The state of mind could also be regarded as the secret realm of the heart. Even the practitioners themselves couldn't peep into the scene of their own state of mind. Ordinary knowledge, feelings, joy, anger, sorrow, joy, and all kinds of obsessions actually originated from the state of mind. And at this moment, When Lin Sun's consciousness returned to the place of the state of mind, he saw the heart tribulation. This tribulation was invisible, but when it appeared in the state of mind, it had already turned into Lin Sun's appearance. It was like the heart thief and heart demon, but different from the heart thief and heart demon. Heart thief and heart demon were both formed by obsessions, and this heart tribulation was formed by the tribulation of Tao cutting. I finally found you. A strong killing intent appeared in Lin Sun's mind. Suddenly, the scene in his state of mind changed, condensed into a sword, and cut at the heart tribulation. Heart like a sword, cut the heart tribulation. Silently, the Lin Sun formed by the heart tribulation disappeared and was destroyed by the heart sword. But soon, the heart tribulation condensed again and sneered. I come from your state of mind. Destroying me is equivalent to destroying your state of mind. Swish! In the state of mind, another sword condensed and cut down without hesitation. The heart tribulation was destroyed, and it couldn't be resisted at all, so it was crushed. This state of mind was originally Lin Sun's domain. Since he had already noticed the existence of the heart tribulation, he naturally didn't want to talk nonsense when he attacked. Soon, the heart tribulation condensed again. But the moment it condensed, it was destroyed by a sword. Just like that, the heart tribulations continued to appear and be destroyed repeatedly. It gave off the feeling that the heart tribulations were indestructible and could not be erased. But Lin Sun could feel that the breath of the heart tribulation was weakening little by little, but it was difficult to notice it if one didn't sense it carefully. Therefore, he didn't stop at all from beginning to end, and kept cutting with the heart sword. At this time, Lin Sun completely understood. The Lin Sun he saw before didn't exist at all. It was because of the tribulation in his state of mind that his perception was affected and a real illusion appeared. The reason why he had been injured by that punch was because there had been a problem with his perception causing the punch to land on his body. Similarly, the two sword strikes of Lin Sun were actually performed by himself. Of course, it was impossible for him to avoid it. In the final analysis, everything was caused by the heart tribulation. The only thing Lin Sun didn't expect was that even with his state of mind, he was unconsciously affected. It could be seen how terrible the Tao cutting tribulation was. No wonder even the infinite Tao Lord and the infinite Dominator had a narrow escape on this road. In fact, Lin Sun didn't know that the dangers he experienced on the road of Tao cutting tribulation were far greater than those who had set foot on this road in the past. The reason was that the more powerful a practitioner was, the more terrible the Tao cutting tribulation would be on the road of Tao cutting tribulation. Just like the tribulation of the heart he was experiencing at this moment. It was precisely because his mental state had attained the state where the heart roamed the world that it caused the tribulation of the heart to become extremely strange and terrifying. Time went by. Lin Sun didn't know how many times he had cut the heart tribulation before it gradually became blurred and weak. In the end, after being cut again, the heart tribulation completely disappeared and never appeared again. At this point, Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief. It was also at this moment that he clearly felt that his state of mind seemed to be cut off an invisible fetter at the moment of cutting off the heart tribulation, and his whole body had a kind of indescribable relaxation and freedom. Then, Lin Sun had many incredible insights. The previous Tao cutting tribulation aimed at the past cut off the karma of the past. At this time, the Tao cutting tribulation aimed at the present cut off the karma of the present. At this point, his every move and every word would no longer be calculated by others, nor would it be noticed and perceived by all the Tao in the world. At the same time, bursts of chaotic power emerged from the Tao cutting tribulation under his feet, submerging Lin Sun's seriously damaged Tao body. It was visible to the naked eye that his injury almost recovered in a few breaths, and Lin Sun felt that the Tao he had mastered had further transformed and was getting closer to the state of chaos. Cutting off the karma of the past and the fetter of the present made me suffer from all kinds of fatal tribulations, but I also got 2 eras in succession, which made my Tao approach the realm of chaos step by step. Lin Sun felt the changes in his body and thought of the saying, "At the beginning of chaos, the beginning of heaven and earth. When he was in the heaven and earth world, his Tao had transformed into the Tao of heaven and earth. Now, his Tao was transforming into the Tao of chaos. From the outside to the inside, it touched the essence of Tao. After a long time, the changes in Lin Sun's body came to an end. On the other hand, his aura had become ethereal and ethereal. He stood there casually, yet he seemed to be standing outside of time and space and transcending above karma. I wonder how much killing intent is hidden in the next tribulation of the future. As he pondered, Lin Sun strode forward. The Tao-cutting tribulation was condensed from the aura of the source of chaos, and it ran through the boundless void and stretched towards the depths as if there was no end to it. All along the way, Lin Sun was vigilant and vigilant at all times. Unexpectedly, there wasn't any danger along the way. Apart from some illusory mist, there wasn't any danger in the mist. After moving forward for an unknown period of time, Lin Sun frowned. The Tao-cutting tribulation severed the Tao of the past, present, and future. He'd already resolved the past and present tribulations, but the tribulation of the future hadn't appeared for a long time. This was slightly unusual. Could it be that the mist is the tribulation of the Tao-cutting tribulation that targets the future? Lin Sun stopped and looked once more at the mist that floated in the void in the distance. Before experiencing the past and present tribulations of the Tao-cutting tribulation, there was nothing around the Tao-cutting tribulation, and there was no mist at all. In other words, the mist appeared later. But along the way, although the mist could be seen everywhere, there was no danger, and Lin Sun didn't feel any threat, so he ignored it. But now, the tribulation of the future hadn't appeared for a long time, which made Lin Sun realize that there might be something strange about the mist. Thinking of this, Lin Sun released the power of his divine awareness and swept towards the mist in the distance. Clatter, the motionless mist seemed to be frightened at this moment, and it retreated further away, as if it was afraid of being touched by Lin Sun's divine awareness. Sure enough, there's something wrong. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. But immediately, he couldn't help but have some doubts. If the mist was the tribulation of the future, why did it seem to be extremely afraid of him approaching it? Chapter 33:07. Lin Sun decided to try again. In the endless void on both sides of the path, there was a lot of gray mist floating around, like pieces of gray cotton. Clatter, Lin Sun spread his spiritual awareness and swept towards the nearest mist nearby. The mist also seemed to be startled and fled into the distance. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help raising his eyebrows. If this mist is aimed at the future catastrophe of Tao cutting, why is it afraid to approach me? The catastrophe of Tao cutting. Could it be that this catastrophe has already noticed that there is no chance for it to attack me on my future path? Lin Sun couldn't help thinking. With his current cultivation and mastery of the Tao of Fate, he could also deduce some mysteries related to the future. But every time he got the mystery, there was a word change. Just like water, there were infinite changes hidden in the future, and there was almost no fixed fate. Of course, this was the mystery Lin Sun got by deducing his own future. When deducing other things in cause and effect, there would be no such change. In Lin Sun's view, the reason why his future path would show a trend of change had a great relationship with his Tao based on the nirvana ultimacy. After all, the essence of nirvana ultimacy was change. It could transform life, and it could also make the Tao and all things have different changes. In other words, in Lin Sun's speculation, his future had been influenced by the nirvana ultimacy a long time ago, showing an unpredictable variable. Now, when he saw the mist constantly dodging him on the path of Tao cutting, Lin Sun vaguely understood. The catastrophe of the future was to cut his own future path. But because his future path was full of changes, the catastrophe of the future couldn't start. Thinking of this, Lin Sun's eyes became strange. But if so, how can I go through the path of Tao cutting? Forget it. Lin Sun made a decision. Since you don't come, I will find you. He suddenly took a deep breath. His figure suddenly glowed and turned into a great abyss that swallowed the heavens. In an instant, it rotated thousands of times, simply like a storm vortex that swept through the heavens, and rumbling sounds began to surge in this world of nothingness. Near the path, the gray mist was frightened, but when they tried to hide far away, they were pulled and devoured by the power of the abyss, causing them to uncontrollably approach Lin's son. Crash, crash. The mist turned into gray airflow and was carried into Lin's body by the rotating abyss. At this moment, Lin Sun felt the power of Tao cutting tribulation, but this kind of power had already been crushed by his own cultivation. After pouring into his body, it turned into a wisp of obscure and magical power of the origin of chaos. As expected, it's precisely because this Tao severing tribulation that's targeting the future can't do anything to me that it hasn't dared to approach me. While Lin Sun was thinking, a steady stream of mist had been swept into the vortex of the abyss and turned into wisps of the origin of chaos. And Lin Sun could feel that his Tao was changing, constantly approaching the state of chaos and becoming stronger and stronger. No one knew how long. Boom! When all the mist around the path of Tao cutting tribulation was refined, the power of Tao in Lin Sun's body completely transformed into the Tao of chaos. It was chaotic and indescribable. Even the power of nirvana ultimacy had undergone a transformation, showing the most primitive aura of chaos. In the past, Lin Sun had also seen a lot of chaotic power, such as the origin of chaos that gave birth to a world, the aura of the chaos tree, and so on. But those were just the side branches of chaos, completely different from the chaos on the path of Tao. The simplest example was that a cultivator's control of the Tao had to go through the levels of Tao aura, Tao, will, longevity law, divine law, emperor law, immortal law, eternal law, and so on. This was a kind of seeking process from the outside to the inside, from the outside to the inside. After the eternal law, it was the Tao of heaven and earth, and after the Tao of heaven and earth, it was chaos. Why was there a rumor in the world that the more Tao fruits of chaos one refined, the more hope one had in attaining transcendence in the ultimate realm of the boundless realm? The reason was because when all the Tao fruits one grasped transformed into the level of chaos, it was equivalent to one's understanding and seeking towards a Tao, and it would truly arrive at its source, essence, and most primitive state. Usually, those that were able to attain this realm possessed the cultivation of the boundless Tao Lord at the weakest, and the formidable even possessed the might of the boundless Dominator. On the other hand, a figure like Lin Sun, who'd attained the perfection stage of the boundless realm a long time ago in the Tao development world, was different. At this moment, he'd already attained the level of chaos on the Grand Tao. On the path of the Tao, he'd come into contact with the profundities of the Tao of life a long time ago. All of this caused his cultivation to undergo a subtle change in the perfection stage of the boundless realm a long time ago, and it was like he'd taken a step forward from the end of the eternal path of the Tao. I understand now. This is the source of the ruins of Tao. What it nurtures is the essence of eternity, and what it creates is the most essential profundities that lead to the Grand Tao. Sever the karma of the past, present, and future, and escape from it. The path of the Tao is no longer shackled, and it's chaos. Only in this way would one be able to seek a higher path towards the Tao from the chaos after a long time, Lin Sun muttered in his heart. Only in this way would one possess the ability to create a Tao that has never existed in the world. He'd sensed the profundities of the essence of eternity that he'd attained, and he'd experienced the profundities that belonged to the chaos. His entire understanding of the Grand Tao had become completely different from before. On the other hand, his current cultivation was like the chaos, and it was the mother of all Taos. He's Lin's son. He's finally here. Suddenly, a wave of voices jolted Lin Sun back to his senses. He opened his eyes, and only now did he notice that the place he stood wasn't on the path of severing the Tao since a long time ago. He was instead on a mysterious platform that covered an area of 3 kilometers. This platform was ancient and primitive, It was branded with the markings of chaotic clouds. It was suffused with strands of gray and hazy chaotic mist, and an aura that belonged to the quintessence of this world enveloped the entire platform. Far away from the platform was a world that seemed like it was in chaos. The sky was boundless while the ground was heavy, and one could faintly see numerous secret realms that were like stars that decorated the heavens and the earth. They were densely packed and seemed to be boundless, and they covered the boundless depths of the world. This was the mysterious God realm, and the place where he stood at this moment was the mysterious Tao platform. Lin Sun's gaze fell on the area near the mysterious Tao platform, and he saw a group of figures standing there. The leader was a figure that was as tall as a mountain, and he carried a pair of black and white swords on his back, but he looked like an old ape. Ape ancestor. Lin Sun's pupils narrowed. Back in the mortal transformation realm, he fought with the other party's Tao karma, so how could he not recognize him? As for the 9 people beside Ape Ancestor, Lin Sun was also very familiar with them. They were the Destiny Path Lord of the 9 divisions of Tai Chu, and he'd already seen their Tao karma in the mortal transformation realm. In addition, there were 2 other people standing beside Ape Ancestor. One was a skinny old man in a beast robe, and the other was a quiet and peaceful monk in a monk's robe. They were the founder of the witchcraft sect, Tian Wu, and the founder of the Zen sect, Sure. Lin Sun was also surprised to see such a group of enemies waiting there. Lin Sun, Xia Ji's voice, which was like the sound of nature, sounded from the side. When he turned his head and saw Xia Ji standing next to him, Lin Sun immediately smiled. Clearly, she had passed the path of cutting Tao earlier than him. This made Lin Sun feel completely at ease. Xia Ji, don't be in a hurry to leave. Lin Sun warned her via voice transmission. He knew that the moment he arrived at the mysterious God realm, a game that had been waiting for a long time had already begun. As for Ape Ancestor and the Destiny Path Lord, Heaven Wizard, and Sure of the 9 divisions of Tai Chu, they were just the prelude to the show. Yes, Xia Ji nodded. At this moment, she also realized that what she was about to face was an unpredictable and unprecedented killing tribulation. But she was not afraid. As long as Lin Sun was there, she was not afraid of anything. My name is Ape9, and people call me Ape Ancestor. Greetings, Taoism Lin. Ape Ancestor spoke from a distance. His voice was old and deep, and his expression was neither sad nor happy. No emotion could be seen on his face. You're not waiting here to welcome me, are you? Lin Sun said casually, very relaxed. This was the Wondrous Way platform. As long as he stood here without moving, the enemy would not find any chance to attack him. What really puzzled Lin Sun was that why his master and senior golden cicada didn't show up at this time. That's right. It's just some subordinates of the Tai Chu sovereign. It's not worth it for master and senior golden cicada to take action personally. Lin Sun thought. At the same time, Ape Ancestor said, Taoism Lin, on your journey to the mysterious God realm, you must have learned a lot of things. You should also know that in the mysterious God realm, whether enemies or friends, they are all waiting for your arrival. After a pause, he continued, and we are waiting here for nothing more than one thing. What is it? Lin Sun asked. Ape Ancestor said, Taoism Lin, please come with us, or you can take the initiative to come with us. I understand that you're inviting me to leave. It's just a matter of fighting to see whose cultivation is higher. But I don't understand why you would ask me to take the initiative to go with you. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, Ape Ancestor said, in fact, even your master Pewdie, Chun Shi, and Chun Linkong want to know why I took the lead and waited for you here. And now, there's no need to hide it. With that, he looked at Lin Sun and said calmly, this game, from the beginning, is doomed. You will lose. This was not only for Lin Sun to hear, but also for the many supreme figures in the dark. From the beginning, I will lose? Lin Sun was silent for a while and suddenly laughed. What a big tone. This kind of words is destined not to be said by you. But even if it is Tai Chu who said it, where does he get the confidence? The Ape Ancestor said, the sect master is never one to exaggerate. Even his opponents in the profound God domain would absolutely not doubt that. Since Hierarch said so, since there's a reason, Taoism Lin, don't take it as an alarmist. After all, once you lose, sometimes you will lose many lives. The price paid is too high and too heavy. And this may not be what Taoism Lin wants to see. His words were very calm, as if he was patiently stating a fact to Lin Sun. But the meaning of his words made Lin Sun frown gradually. Chapter 3308. Profound God Domain. Hidden World. Sub-Hoodie frowned. He's definitely going to lose from the very beginning? He'd noticed Lin Sun's arrival at the profound Dao platform, and he'd told Golden Cicada with a smile that the game was about to begin. But Sub-Hoodie was slightly surprised when he heard Ape Ancestor's words. Of course, it wasn't Ape Ancestor's intention. It represented absolute beginning's attitude. How could the beginning, who was trapped under the sword chains, have the guts to say that he would lose for sure? Golden Cicada said warmly, "It's easy to understand. In absolute beginning's opinion, both you and I, along with Chun Shi and Chen Linkong, were already in a situation where we were definitely going to lose before Lin Sun arrived." Sub-Hoodie fell silent for a moment before he said, "In terms of cultivation, people like us are indeed slightly inferior to absolute beginning. But in the profound God domain, there's Chun Shi, the supreme overlord who controls samsara, and he's on par with absolute beginning in terms of the Grand Tao. But absolute beginning clearly thinks that even Chun Shi will lose." He couldn't figure it out. Since absolute beginning said this, it was definitely not an exaggeration. After all, there was no need for an existence like him to intimidate or put on airs. Then there was only one possibility left. Absolute beginning had a plan. Moreover, it was enough to fight Chun Shi and make them lose everything. Sub-Hoodie couldn't help but reveal a wisp of seriousness when he thought up to here. Golden Cicada looked at Sub-Hoodie and said, "Fellow Taoist, wait a little longer. The game has just begun, and absolute beginning and Chun Shi haven't made a move yet." Sub-Hoodie nodded. "We'll definitely lose, Primordial World." A figure pushed open the door and walked out of the hut. He carried an ancient sword on his back with ease. It was Chun Shi. He placed his hands behind his back and looked at the distant sky. "Absolute beginning. Since Lin Sun is here, there's no need for you to continue hiding there. That swordsman's sword lock can trap you for a while, but can't trap you forever." His voice was clear and casual. At the same time, absolute beginning's laughter resounded from deep underground in that chaotic world. Fellow Taoist Chun can't restrain himself as well. "Huh." Chun Shi laughed. "Since you think so, then let me see how long you'll wait." With that, he returned to the thatched cottage. In the primal chaos world, deep underground, absolute beginning couldn't help but sigh with satisfaction. There are enemies in this world, but my Tao isn't lonely. Not far away, the black crow on the branch was trembling. Earlier, when Chun Shi's voice resounded through this dimension, she felt a feeling of suffocation and despair. It was a form of true suppression of the Grand Tao, and it far exceeded her imagination. "Little crow, did you see that? This is Chun Shi's power. Just a single sentence from him can scare you to death." Absolute beginning laughed, and he was actually very cheerful and happy. "Sect leader, are they really going to lose?" After a long time, Black Crow calmed himself down and asked, "There are no absolutes in this world." The beginning casually said, "Just watch the show." Black Crow fell silent, in front of the profound Tao platform. Although these words aren't threats, they're no different from threats. Lin Sun, who was frowning, suddenly laughed. "Then I really want to see how the hierarch behind you will make me lose." "You'll definitely be able to see it." The ape ancestor nodded, looking as calm as before. He was not surprised by Lin's reaction. "I want to see it too." Right at this moment, a voice sounded out from afar. Chen Linkong's figure appeared out of nowhere. Behind him were the Origin Sect's ancestral founder, Yuan Shu, and the Spirit Sect's ancestral founder, Xuyin. "Little friend Lin, long time no see." As soon as he arrived, Chen Linkong waved his hand in greeting in an extremely carefree manner. Lin Sun also cupped his hands and greeted Chen Linkong, Yuan Shu, and Xuyin one by one. Then he pointed at Ape Ancestor and said, "Seniors, be careful of these guys." Chen Linkong nodded. Don't worry. Chun Linkong, you shouldn't have come. The ape ancestor looked at Chun Linkong with a calm expression. You and the two people behind you will die for nothing. Chun Linkong couldn't help but be amused, and he said, then I really want to experience it. As he spoke, he asked Yuan Shu and Su Yin to retreat, and then a strand of terrifying, chaotic sword intent surged out from his tall figure. In that instant, he seemed to have transformed into a ruler of the Sword Tao, and his brilliance was boundless. Ape Ancestor, I wanted to test my strength with you for a long time. Why don't we do it now? Chun Linkong spoke, and his voice seemed like an endless sword howl that resounded clearly. Such a graceful bearing was rarely seen in the world. The aura of the great perfection of the boundless realm, and his great Tao has already attained the chaotic realm. Lin Sun noticed Chun Linkong's charm with a single glance, and he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Without a doubt, Chun Linkong already possessed the qualifications to go against the ape ancestor. You can't. The ape ancestor shook his head. He didn't show any disdain, but his calm and casual expression was undoubtedly the greatest rejection to Chun Linkong. Chun Linkong smiled and didn't say anything else. He stretched out his hand and grabbed. An expanse of chaotic flames condensed and transformed into a burning Taoist sword. As he flicked his finger, a clang resounded, and a sword howl resounded through the heavens and the earth. The invisible sword intent transformed into ripples that completely disregarded the restraints of time and space, and it spread towards the ape ancestor and the others. The ape ancestor's expression was still as calm as before. He didn't seem to move, but the figures of the 9 Destiny Path Lords, Heaven Shaman, and Sure were all moved behind him. At the same time, he stretched out his palm, formed a fist, and smashed it in the void. Boom! The invisible sword intent ripples shattered and exploded layer by layer. This scene made Lin Sun couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. The ape ancestor was naturally in existence at the great perfection of the boundless realm. His every move seemed casual, but in reality, it displayed a perfect and flawless posture, embracing yin and yang, and was impeccable. Clang! Chun Linkong stepped forward with his sword and stabbed in the void. Chaos emerged in the void, turning into a torrential rain of flaming swords that were like the Milky Way, illuminating the mountains and rivers in a dazzling manner. Such an attack affected the origin of the great Tao chaos. Not to mention other Boundless Realm figures. Even the Boundless Path Lord would find it hard to resist. The ape ancestor's sleeves fluttered, and his figure that was as tall as a mountain suddenly surged with chaotic chi, like a round and boundless Tai Chi, incomparably mysterious. Then, the ape ancestor punched out. Immediately, the sword intent and the fist force, 2 kinds of supreme power of the Tao path, collided. It caused the heavens and the earth to tremble, and rays of light flowed. Lin Sun noticed that the heavens and the earth of the mystic god domain were incomparably solid, and it was sufficient to withstand the impact of the great Tao energy. Rumble, rumble, Chun Linkong and the ape ancestor fought intensely, and it was like 2 eternal rulers were fighting. Every time they attacked, they would draw upon the chaotic energy, and the phenomena they revealed could be said to be boundlessly terrifying. With Lin Sun's current gaze, he instantly made a judgment. In a battle like this, those figures at the level of the Boundless Path Lord couldn't participate at all, and once they did, they would die without a doubt. Because that level of strength already involved the utilization of the ultimate energy of the eternal path of the Tao, and it broke through the restraints of time and space. Every single move of theirs was a manifestation of the peak of their Tao path. Why don't we seize this opportunity to kill those fellows first? Xia Ji suddenly transmitted her voice, and her gaze looked towards the 9 envoys, Heaven Shaman, and Sure in the distance. These figures were absolutely existences that Lin Sun could only look up to before entering the ruins of profundity of Tao. But now, no matter if it was Lin Sun or Xia Ji, they had already far surpassed them on the Tao path, so they naturally wouldn't take them seriously. If I move, I'm afraid it will cause a lot of variables. Lin Sun raised his head and looked at the vast world in the distance. Due to the barrier of the power of the profound Tao platform, his divine sense was restricted. But he dared to conclude that whether it was Tai Chu, Black Crow, his master, Golden Cicada, or Chun Shi, they were probably paying attention to everything that happened here. And every move of Lin Sun, a variable, was bound to be the one they paid the most attention to. Once he left the profound Tao platform, it might lead to unpredictable variables. But if you don't move, how can you break the situation? Don't you have the confidence to fight against Tai Chu? Xia Ji couldn't help asking. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he couldn't help laughing. You're right. I can't see anything if I just stand here and watch. On the contrary, it will make those enemies think that I, Lin Sun, am not confident enough. Previously, he had guessed that since everyone in the mysterious god realm was waiting for him, they must have made a plan long ago. Therefore, after he arrived, he didn't act rashly. He intended to see how many variables would be caused by his arrival and how many means Tai Chu had prepared to deal with him. But now, Xia Ji's words made him suddenly realize that if he kept waiting, he was doomed to be in a passive position all the time. If he wanted to break the situation, he naturally had to get into the situation first. Otherwise, how could he know how many means and cards the enemy had? When he was strong enough, why should he be afraid of the many variables and killing tribulations when he broke the situation? I didn't expect that Xia Ji could see more clearly than me. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Xia Ji said softly, you just worry about your master and others, so you have a lot of worries in your heart. But I'm different. I only care about you. Sometimes the simplest and most direct idea was the most of the point. My only concern now is not the Tao or the opponent. Lin Sun looked at Xia Ji. You're worried that in the next battle, the variables that will appear will implicate me. So you plan to let me hide? Summer Solstice instantly understood. Telepathy was nothing more than this. Lin Sun nodded. Xia Ji didn't refuse and said, okay. She knew that Lin Sun did this because he cared about her and regarded her as the most important person in his heart. How could she refuse? Lin Sun smiled, turned his sleeve, and took out the eternal boat. Xia Ji turned into a shadow and flew into it. After putting away the eternal boat, Lin Sun's heart completely calmed down. The mysterious god realm might be full of horrible, killing tribulations and unexpected variables. But now, he had nothing to worry about. The next moment, Lin Sun stepped out of the mysterious Tao platform. When he moved, Pei Tu, Qin Yangzi, and other Tao masters of the 9 divisions of Tai Chu, Heaven Wizard, and Sure all noticed it. At the same time, Yuan Chu and Su Yin, Chen Linkong, and Ape Ancestor who were fighting fiercely, and Bodhi, Golden Cicada, Chen Shi, and Tai Chu who were waiting in different secret realms also noticed it. All eyes, tangible and intangible, converged on Lin Sun's movement. There's more tonight. Chapter 3309. Daoist brother. He's moving. Golden Cicada stood up while his robe fluttered, and a profound light flickered in his eyes. Could it be that he'll be able to stay on the platform forever? Subhoodie smiled as he stood up as well. Action leads to change, and change leads to success. In the end, we'll have to see if he succeeds or fails. I never expected that Chun Shi would ask Chen Linkong to make a move, said Golden Cicada softly. Subhoodie remained silent. His mind was focused on the profound Tao platform, the primordial spirit world. The thatched cottage was deathly silent. Chun Shi didn't move, but he was paying attention from afar as well. Master, he's coming out. At this moment, Black Crow actually felt indescribably excited. It was like he'd been waiting for countless years for such a scene to finally arrive. Deep underground, Absolute Beginning said, wait a little longer. Wait a little longer? Black Crow was slightly puzzled. Outside the platform, Pei Tu and the other Heaven's Mandate Tao Lords, Heaven Shaman, and Sure revealed solemn expressions as they prepared for battle. According to their previous inference, Lin Sun already possessed the strength of the boundless Tao Lord while he was in the universe of universe. However, they weren't sure if Lin Sun's cultivation had improved after overcoming the path of severing the path. At practically the exact same moment, Yuanshu and Su-in were accumulating strength and prepared to support Lin Sun. However, right at the moment he stepped out of the platform, Lin Sun suddenly turned around to look at Yuanshu and Su-in, and he said, "Seniors, just watch the show." Before he finished speaking, his figure had already completely left the profound Tao platform. At that moment, without the cover of the power of the profound Tao platform, Lin Sun's breath was also revealed. However, Pei Tu and the others frowned because Lin Sun's aura was simply like nothingness, and they couldn't sense it at all. It was like he didn't exist in this world at all, or like he'd fused with the world a long time ago. The world was him, and he was the world. The hearts of Pei Tu and the others shook when they noticed this. Even they, the boundless Tao Lords, were unable to see through it. Didn't this mean that Lin Sun's current cultivation far exceeded their understanding? At this moment, without the isolation of the platform, Lin Sun's divine sense and mind could truly sense the aura of the profound God domain. This God domain was obscure like the chaos, vast and boundless. In this endless world, there were countless secret realms. In 3 of these secret realms, he sensed a different aura. His master, the master of the square inch, and the golden cicada were in the same arcana realm. The former's aura was vast and profound, while the latter's aura was as calm as water. The second secret realm had a profound and unfathomable aura, and there were miraculous traces of samsara and divine talismans suffused the air. This was definitely the secret realm, Senior Chun, she resided in. Within the 3 secret realms, it was a sea of chaos. There was a bone-chilling aura, but there was also an extremely obscure aura that was almost undetectable. When he captured this obscure aura, Lin Sun immediately felt a sense of familiarity. Without a doubt, this was the aura of the primordial dominator. Lin Sun had seen it as early as in the spiritual realm. That bone-chilling aura definitely came from Absolute Beginning's first servant, Black Crow. But in next to no time, Lin Sun withdrew this feeling. He stood in the air as he glanced at Pei Tu and the others who were waiting in formation, and then he looked at the secret realm in the distance. He said, "Absolute Beginning, I've already established myself in this world. You wouldn't be intending to send these fellows to their deaths, right?" His voice was flat, but it resounded through the heavens and the earth. Even though Pei Tu, Tian Wu, and Shi's expressions were calm, they felt that it was absurd in their hearts. This Lin Sun actually doesn't take us seriously at all now. Primordial and Su-in glanced at each other, and their expressions became strange as well. They were able to discern that Lin Sun really didn't take Pei Tu and the others seriously at all, or it could be said that he directly disregarded them. Sub-Hoodie revealed a wisp of a gratified expression. So, he already possesses this level of cultivation. Taoist brother, you didn't expect this as well? Asked Golden Cicada. I thought that he would remain in the ultimate realm of the boundless realm like me, and if he wanted to come into contact with the Tao of life, then he would have to seek it from the profound God domain. But now it would seem like he's already ahead of me. Sub-Hoodie's brows, gaze, and the corners of his mouth were filled with a heartfelt smile. In the past, I told those disciples that the disciple didn't have to be inferior to the master. But now, Lin Sun has already surpassed the master. Golden Cicada fell silent for a moment, and then he smiled as well. It's unexpected indeed. Of course, he didn't let down Taoist brother's efforts. Lin Sun, a surprised exclamation of praise resounded from the thatched cottage in the primordial world. Being unexpected was a variable in itself. This is interesting, but there's no rush. The game has only just begun. Young brother Lin, I'll give you a chance to take a good look at the profound God domain. Right at this moment, Absolute Beginning's voice resounded in the heavens and the earth on the profound Tao platform, and his voice was neither fast nor slow as he spoke casually. Ape Ancestor, bring them back. All right. The ape ancestor who was fighting intensely with Chun Linkong nodded in agreement. Want to leave? Did I agree to that? Chun Linkong sneered. Why would I need your permission if I wanted to leave? The ape ancestor's expression was calm and indifferent. Bang! In the next moment, The imposing aura on his body that was tall like a mountain suddenly changed, and he actually forcefully blasted Chen Linkong over 100 m back with a single punch. Pooh! When he steadied himself, Chen Linkong's chest rose and fell rapidly, and he actually couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood. This scene caused everyone present to be surprised. What was supposed to have been an evenly matched battle had been broken by the ape ancestors' terrifying technique in an instant. Even Lin Sun hadn't expected this to happen. Swoosh! The ape ancestor teleported over, and he flicked his sleeve with the intention of leaving with Pei Tu and the others. Lin Sun immediately pressed his fingers together and stabbed forward. A strand of sword chi appeared out of thin air and slashed down towards the ape ancestor. When they sensed the aura contained within this sword strike, Pei Tu and the others noticed to their horror that they actually couldn't arouse any thoughts of resisting it, and only deep powerlessness and despair remained. Moreover, this sword strike was slashing towards the ape ancestor. They didn't dare to imagine how terrifying this sword strike would be if it was aimed at them. It was also at this time that they finally understood why Lin Sun had ignored them before. On the path of Tao, Lin Sun had long left them, the boundless Tao masters, far behind. In the face of Lin Sun's sword strike, the ape ancestor, who was as tall as a mountain, suddenly shrank to a height of about 10 m, but his aura was much stronger than before. As he smashed out with his fist, Lin Sun's sword chi was actually blocked, and then it exploded together with the fist force. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion resounded, and the divine light swept across the world. The ape ancestor had already taken this opportunity to disappear into thin air with Pei Tu and the others. When Lin Sun wanted to chase after him, it was already a step too late. In fact, he didn't expect that the ape ancestor could actually block his sword strike, so he missed the opportunity to chase after him. This series of actions happened extremely quickly. When the curtain fell, Yuan Shu, Su Yin, and the others near the Xian God realm were already in a cold sweat. The strength that Lin Sun showed surprised everyone. But at this moment, the strength that the ape ancestor revealed was even more shocking. This old thing, he actually concealed so much strength. In the distance, Chen Linkong wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and his expression became serious. When he thought of the previous battle, he felt a chill in his heart. If the ape ancestor had directly used his full strength from the beginning, would he still be able to persist until now? When he thought of this, Chen Linkong felt a chill down his spine. He has already taken a step from this ultimate realm and touched the mystery of the way of life. At this moment, Lin Sun finally dared to conclude that the ape ancestor's true cultivation was not at the great perfection of the boundless realm, but had taken that step in this realm, just like himself. This made him unable to help but shiver. He thought of what the ape ancestor had said before, that from the beginning of this game, they were destined to lose without a doubt. In this way, it seemed that the ape ancestor's true strength was one of the trump cards of Tai Chu. This time, it was you who saved me. Chen Linkong walked over and looked Lin Sun up and down. If you hadn't taken that step, I'm afraid that old man Tai Chu would not have let the ape ancestor retreat. He really didn't expect that Lin Sun, who had broken through the way of severing, had already reached such a level. Senior, this is not a good place to talk. Lin Sun smiled. Although the previous situation had been resolved, Lin Sun didn't dare to be careless when he thought of the power exposed by the ape ancestor. No one knew whether Tai Chu had other means. Would you like to meet my grandfather? Chen Linkong invited. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, I'd better wait until I meet my master, and then I'll go to meet Senior Chen Shi. Chen Linkong nodded, and then said, doubtfully, why do I feel that the ape ancestor retreated too suddenly? Although there were some changes, it still felt like a tiger's head but a snake's tail. Lin Sun said, if I was at the great perfection of the boundless realm, and the ape ancestor didn't expose his strength, this situation would not be easy to resolve. Chen Linkong thought for a moment and suddenly gasped. Yes, even if my grandfather took action at that time, the ape ancestor would definitely try his best to stop him. Even if he was not my grandfather's opponent, he could at least stop him for a while. And taking advantage of this opportunity, old Tai Chu could deal with you. At that time, even if your Master Pewdie and Golden Cicada took action together, I'm afraid they couldn't stop Tai Chu. This wasn't to slander Subhoodie and Golden Cicada's cultivation, and it was instead because everyone in the profound God domain was clearly aware that the only person capable of threatening a figure like Absolute Beginning was Chen Shi. Once Chen Shi was stopped, Tai Chu would be unmatched and unstoppable. And it was precisely because Lin Sun's Taoism was not only at the great perfection of the boundless realm, as everyone speculated, that there was a change in such a killing situation. After noticing all this, Tai Chu made a prompt decision and let the ape ancestor choose to retreat with his people. It could be said that the previous situation seemed to end in a very short time, but a little carelessness would be a great disaster. On one side, Yuan Shu and Xuyin were also shocked, and their faces changed when they heard Chen Linkong's analysis. Indeed, if it weren't for the change in Lin Sun's Taoism, the killing intent contained in this situation would be fatal enough. The fourth watch was delivered. There was no more tonight. Chapter 33:10. Beneath the sky, Lin Sun, Chen Linkong, Yuan Shu, and Su Yin flashed towards the distance. On the way, Lin Sun found out that Yuan Shu, Su Yin, and Chen Linkong had been hiding in the primordial world all these years. His masters, the core master and Golden Cicada, resided in the hidden world instead. As for their enemies, the absolute beginning ruler and Hei resided in the grand chaos world. The ape ancestor and the other 9 heaven fate Tao lords resided in the dark spirit world. But no matter which secret realm it was, all of them had a similarity, and it was the quintessence energy of chaos that belonged to the profound God domain could be absorbed and refined there. On the other hand, the other secret realms in the profound God domain were mostly in a desolate and exhausted state. According to what Chen Linkong said, the profound God domain was extremely vast, and the secret realms that were distributed throughout it were innumerable. However, secret realms like the primordial spirit world, hidden realm, grand chaos world, and dark spirit world could already be said to be the best places of cultivation amongst all the secret realms. Most importantly, cultivating in these 4 secret realms gave one a chance to sense the aura of the forbidden area of profundity. The forbidden area of profundity was where the profound God domain resided, and it was taken to be a forbidden zone for life. According to rumor, there was a path towards the Tao that surpassed the eternal path towards the Tao within it, the Tao of life. In the countless years of the past, supreme existences like Chun Shi and Absolute Beginning had been constantly sensing and deducing the aura within the forbidden area of profundity. As they spoke, Lin Sun's group had arrived at the entrance to the hidden world. The entrance to this world was like a vortex passageway condensed from chaos, and it was extremely mysterious. Controlling the quintessence of chaos within this world allows one to take precautions against any unexpected events while cultivating within it, and one doesn't have to worry about being ambushed by enemies. That's what we've been doing all these years. Chen Linkong smiled as he explained. In other words, under normal circumstances, no one would choose to leave a secret realm because it's extremely easy for them to suffer an attack from their enemies. The situation today is exactly like that. Lin Sun came to a sudden understanding. Whem! As they spoke, the vortex passageway surged, and then a voice resounded. Lin Sun, quickly come in. The warm voice came from the core master. Yes. Lin Sun restrained the excitement in his heart, and he cupped his hands towards Chen Linkong and the others. I'll pay all of you a visit another day. Chen Linkong smiled and nodded. Go ahead. Lin Sun turned around, walked into the whirlpool tunnel, and disappeared. Chen Linkong and the others continued to fly forward. The great chaos realm. The aura of primal chaos filled the air. When Ancestor Ape brought them into this world, Pei Tu and the others, Tian Wu, and Sure could not help but feel a trace of caution in their hearts, and their expressions became solemn. Countless years had passed, But this was the first time they had entered the residence of Sect Master Tai Chu. In the boundless heavens and the earth, the mountains and rivers rose and fell, and all of them were covered in a layer of chaotic aura. It caused everything in the world to seem dim and blurry. Very quickly, a bald black ancient tree appeared on the ground, and it took root there all by itself. On the branch of the ancient tree stood a crow with pitch-black feathers and a pair of blood-red eyes. It was Absolute Beginning's first servant, Black Crow. "Greetings, young mistress." Pei Tu and the others bowed. "Don't you feel ashamed to return empty-handed?" Black Crow said coldly. Pei Tu and the others, his expression stiffened, and he couldn't help but feel even more oppressed and nervous in his heart. This has nothing to do with them, so why get angry at them? Little Crow, these old friends have fought with me for many years, and they could be said to be companions of mine. You have to speak politely. Tai Chu's calm and casual voice sounded out from deep underground. His voice seemed to possess magic, and it swept away the nervousness in the hearts of Pei Tu and the others. They became calm and steady, and their entire bodies seemed to have relaxed. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion in their hearts. A long time ago, when they had followed Tai Chu to conquer the heavens and walk on the Grand Tao, they were so high-spirited and carefree. But since they entered the ruins of Tao, they rarely saw Tai Chu again. But as their cultivation grew, their reverence towards Tai Chu grew deeper. It was even to the extent that they often felt a sense of distance. But now, when Tai Chu said this, they couldn't help but recall the past. Everyone, all of you can be at ease in this world. At least with me here, those opponents can't threaten all of you. Tai Chu's voice sounded out from deep underground once more. Sect leader, we were useless. We couldn't exterminate Lin Sun when he entered the Soul's God realm. Pei Tu revealed a look of shame. The others also lowered their heads. Tai Chu said, "This has nothing to do with you, so there's no need to mention what happened in the past. After this game ends, I will give all of you a chance to corroborate your Tao to the great circle of the boundless realm. As for whether you can grasp it, it will depend on your own abilities." Pei Tu and the others trembled, and they almost didn't dare to believe their ears. No one expected that Tai Chu would actually promise to obtain such a great fortune for them. Sect leader, old people like Pei Tu who had followed Tai Chu since a long time ago couldn't help but feel emotional at this moment and even felt like crying. It had been a long time since they experienced Tai Chu's care. Tai Chu sighed. "In the future, don't call me sect leader anymore. Don't you understand? The biggest obstacle to corroborating your Tao to the Great Circle is your reverence and reliance towards me. If you don't sever these fetters, how can you corroborate your Tao to the Great Circle of the Tao?" Pei Tu and the others trembled. "Ape Ancestor, take them to find a place to cultivate," Tai Chu said. Ape Ancestor nodded and left the place with Pei Tu and the other boundless Tao, Lord who were in turmoil. Until their figures disappeared from sight, Black Crow couldn't help but wonder, "Sect leader, why do I feel that you have suddenly changed?" Tai Chu was silent for a moment and muttered to himself, "Maybe it's because I'm too lonely. The further I go on this road, the fewer people there will be around me. There are only a few people I can talk to. Now I'm good to them, just to keep them as a memory. If I don't see them again in the future, they won't think that I abandoned them." His voice gradually became low, with a sense of loss that couldn't be dispelled. "Sect leader, I'm always here." Black Crow couldn't help saying, "An ape ancestor, he will always be by your side." But Tai Chu laughed. "Let's not talk about this. Now that Lin Sun has come and the game has begun, I'm much happier than before, especially since he has already taken that step. This is a huge surprise for me." Surprise? Or a big surprise? Black Crow was a little confused. Black Crow was a little stunned. After a while, she couldn't help but say, "Is it that the more powerful he is, the more valuable he is to you? How could such a variable be measured?" Tai Chu said leisurely, "Do you know why I never complained when I was suppressed here by the swordsman? Because he let me know that although the Tao I pursue is different, although we can't coexist, I'm destined not to be too lonely in this life." After a pause, he laughed. What's more rare is that the emergence of a worthy opponent proves that my Tao is not invincible in the world. Isn't this a good thing? That's the way to seek the Tao. Black Crow was speechless for a moment. She never knew how it was a good thing to have an enemy, and she never thought that the sect leader would be so happy because of the existence of an enemy. Sect leader, do you think that Lin Sun is already a worthy opponent? Black Crow asked. Tai Chu was silent for a moment and said, "It's rare to be happy, so it's okay to tell you. Compared with Chun Shi and the swordsman, Lin Sun is still a little short of maturity. What I can't figure out most about him is the word change, which is also the reason why I regard him as an enemy." He paused for a moment and continued. All those years ago, the eternal arc that flew out from the forbidden area of profundity ought to have been in my possession, yet it brushed past me in the end. Although at that time, with the help of the eternal boat, I entered the eternal gate, comprehended the origin of spirit, and touched the mystery of life at one stroke. But in the end, the eternal boat was lost in my hands. Speaking of this, there was a trace of surprise in his voice. It's interesting that after countless years, the eternal boat finally appeared in the hands of Lin Sun. This can't be described as a coincidence. The eternal knight, divine emperor, was born in the spiritual world, and he fled with the eternal boat. After he reincarnated, the eternal boat fell into the hands of Luo Tongtian. However, even though Luo Tongtian comprehended the talent of the devouring abyss, he didn't truly control the eternal boat. On the other hand, the eternal knight, divine emperor, reincarnated into Xia Ji, and when Xia Ji appeared by Lin Sun's side, it just happened to be when Lin Sun activated the heaven-accessing realm with the devouring abyss bloodline. At that time, Xia Ji found Lin Sun because of the devouring abyss, but merely because of the devouring abyss talent, she would definitely not allow Lin Sun to keep the eternal boat. Later on, when I found out about Nirvana, I finally understood that Lin Sun being able to keep this treasure was related to Nirvana. Simply speaking, the eternal boat came from the forbidden land of wonders, and its fate was related to Nirvana. Similarly, Xia Ji possessed the reincarnation of a divine emperor, and her origins were from the forbidden land of life as well. So, her transformation was related to Lin Sun's Nirvana profundity. If Lin Sun was here, he would definitely be shocked, because a long time ago, he had indeed placed Xia Ji in the abyssal sword cauldron to bathe in the power of Nirvana profundity. This also meant that Xia Ji's current cultivation was also influenced by the Tao of Nirvana, and all of this had long been seen through by the absolute beginning ruler. At this moment, after he finished explaining the sequence of events, absolute beginning pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "If it's in terms of the Tao of karma, then I experienced 100,000 years of searching to draw over this eternal vessel from the forbidden area of profundity. And because of this treasure, there was the eternal night divine emperor, the devouring abyss, and the wonderful karma between Lin Sun and Xia Ji. This is what I'm interested in." When Black Crow heard this, he could not help but feel an indescribable feeling of horror. "Sect Master, do you think that this eternal boat also caused a trace of karma between you and Lin Sun?" Chapter 33:11. Tai Chu thought for a moment and said, "This is not cause and effect. In the final analysis, all this is related to Lin Sun's Nirvana." Nirvana. Black Crow couldn't help but nod secretly. They regarded Lin Sun as a variable because of this mysterious power. Tai Chu sighed with emotion. "I have to say that Lin Sun has a good master. I don't know how he deduced the mystery of Nirvana. In this respect, I have to admire Pewdie. But he is still no match for Hierarch." Black Crow said. Tai Chu said, "Wrong. If his disciple has a chance to defeat me, doesn't it show that he is more powerful as a master?" He sighed. "What's more, he didn't take the power of Nirvana himself, but left it to his disciple Lin Sun. Such courage is really amazing. Lin Sun has no chance to defeat Hierarch. This kind of thing will never happen." Black Crow was not convinced. Tai Chu laughed. "When Ape Ancestor took action, I said that there is no absolute thing in this world. Only by understanding this can one not be blinded by ignorance and conceit. Hierarch, you are right. In the distance, ape ancestor had returned. Fellow practitioner, your cultivation has been exposed. Now, there is no need to hide it. Deep underground, Tai Chu's voice suddenly became subtle. Fellow practitioner, Black Crow was shocked and looked at ape ancestor in surprise. However, ancestor ape's expression was calm. He was still the same as before and said, Cult master, I'm not who I used to be. It doesn't matter to me whether I hide it or not. Black Crow couldn't help asking, Ape ancestor, who were you before? She really couldn't calm down. Speaking of which, the ape ancestor had been with Tai Chu for a long time, but he had always been an old servant. Countless years had passed, and he had always listened to Tai Chu's orders, never revealing anything special. So until now, whether it was her or other people in the 9 tribes of Tai Chu, although they respected ape ancestor, they had always treated him as an old servant of Tai Chu. But now, Black Crow suddenly found that the identity of ape ancestor was not simple. He had hidden himself too deeply. Black Crow could not help but feel terrified. The ape ancestor was the person she trusted the most apart from the leader. Who would have thought that the ape ancestor would hide another face for so many years? If not for ape ancestor exposing his cultivation that far surpassed the level of grand completion, boundless realm in front of the myriad profound Dao platform today, he would probably still continue hiding. Miss, the past me is already dead, Ancestor Ape said. An indescribable rage surged in Black Crow's heart. It was as if he had been deceived for countless years, yet he still could not find a reason that he could accept. Little Crow, it won't be long before you find out. Don't blame Ancestor Ape. I was the one who asked him to do this. Absolute Beginning's voice rang out. All of a sudden, the anger in Black Crow's heart turned into bitterness and helplessness as he remained silent. Sectmaster, do you think that she has seen through my identity? Ancestor Ape suddenly asked. Absolute Beginning said. In his eyes, you have already fallen into the cycle of reincarnation, and it is impossible for you to appear again. However, he might not be able to guess that it's you, but you've exposed some of your strength after all, and this will definitely arouse his vigilance. That's fine. Ancestor Ape's expression was calm. Just wait. The game has already begun. I want to see how many surprises Lin Sun, who has also taken that step on the boundless path, can bring me from the forbidden area of profundity. Absolute Beginning's voice vanished from the depths of the ground. Ancestor Ape went silent for a moment before turning around and leaving. Black Crow watched Ancestor Ape's figure vanish with a complicated expression in his eyes. Primordial Spirit World. Chun Linkong arrived before his grandfather Chun Shi's thatched cottage by himself, and then he sat on a rock at the side and said, Grandfather, I owe little friend Lin a life this time. His voice carried self-ridicule. Thinking back to all those years ago in the ruins of fortune, his cultivation was far above Lin Sun's, and if it wasn't for Lin Sun today, he would have almost been captured and killed by Ancestor Ape. This was equivalent to Lin Sun saving his life. Didn't you help him slaughter a path of blood in the ruins of fortune all those years ago? Such kindness can't be calculated like this. If you take him as a friend, then you can't calculate who owes him a favor. Chun Shi's clear voice came from the thatched cottage. What's more, Ancestor Ape doesn't want to deal with you this time, but he wants to cooperate with Absolute Beginning to stop me from helping Lin Sun. After all, only by hiding his strength can he take me by surprise. Chun Linkong nodded, and then he asked doubtfully, Grandfather, when did Ancestor Ape take that step? We've been in the mysterious god domain for countless years, but why haven't we noticed any movement? In the thatched cottage, Chun Shi was silent for a moment, and then he said, perhaps he had already taken that step long before he came to the mysterious god domain. This is indeed a variable that even I didn't notice. I have to say that both Absolute Beginning and Ancestor Ape have concealed their strength deeply. Chun Linkong thought for a moment, and then he suddenly smiled. Fortunately, no matter how deeply Absolute Beginning and Ancestor Ape hide, I didn't expect little friend Lin to have taken that step now. The first round is a draw at best. It's not like what the beginning said that will definitely lose. You're thinking too simply. Chun-Shi said, absolute beginning's trump cards are bound to be more than just Ancestor Ape. Or perhaps he definitely has other cards up his sleeves. But it's fine. At the end of the game, we'll have to determine our true strength. Chen Linkong frowned and said, Grandfather, there's something I've always been puzzled about. Why does an absolute beginning make a move right now? Or perhaps, why do we have to continue waiting like this? Absolute beginning wants to see what sort of changes a variable like little friend Lin would cause when he senses the forbidden area of profundity. This will decide if he'll attack with his full strength. Within the thatched cottage, Chun-Shi said, on the other hand, I want to see if the variable that Lin Sun possesses can break through this predicament. Chun-Shi paused for a moment and said, from today onward, stay in this dimension and cultivate. Don't leave this dimension again. Concentrate on the Tao. That's the right path. Chen Linkong nodded. Hidden region. The mountains and rivers were picturesque, and the heavens and the earth were enshrouded by chaotic energy. It was like one had arrived at the beginning of the chaos. As soon as Lin Sun entered, he saw the master of the core and Golden Cicada standing side by side. The former wore a cloth robe, had a thin appearance, and his aura was indifferent and indistinct. The latter was still the same as he was all those years ago. He wore linen clothes, was barefoot, and had a handsome appearance like a young man. His gaze was clear, and a warm smile hung on the corners of his mouth. This was the first time Lin Sun had seen his master, the master of the core, since he'd started cultivating, so he couldn't help but feel excited. He bowed and said, Disciple Lin Sun greets Master and Senior Golden Cicada. Subhoodie smiled and said, Come with me. After a short moment, they sat down at the side of a cliff. This place was covered in mist and surged with a dense and miraculous aura of the quintessence of chaos. Subhoodie sat down cross-legged, extracted a strand of chaotic energy, and then placed it into the tea furnace along with the divine spring on the mountain and some chaotic bamboo leaves. It wasn't long before the tea boiled, and a strand of the fragrance of tea suffused the air. Subhoodie poured a cup for both Golden Cicada and Lin Sun, and then he said in a light voice, How are your senior brothers and senior sisters? Lin Sun told him everything he'd experienced in the Sea of Destiny. When he learned that Lin Sun had used the profound of Nirvana to bring his senior brother back from the dead, Subhoodie smiled and said with relief, At that time, I noticed some clues and guessed that your senior brother had changed his fate. Now that I've heard it from you again, I still feel that the profound of Nirvana is really wonderful. Golden Cicada asked, Little friend, to what extent has your control over the profound of Nirvana reached? I've also refined it to the realm of chaos. Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, However, if you really want to study it carefully, the profound of Nirvana has long surpassed the scope of the eternal Tao. After all, even the profound of spiritual endowment had been merged with the profound of Nirvana, which made Lin Sun's Tao had already undergone a subtle and miraculous transformation from the level of boundless realm to a higher Tao. Can I have a look? Golden Cicada seemed to be extremely curious. Lin Sun smiled and said, Why not? As he spoke, he gently flicked his fingertip, and a strand of obscure aura belonging to Nirvana emerged, mysterious and indescribably wonderful. Golden Cicada observed and sensed for a moment, and couldn't help but fall silent. Fellow Taoist, have you sensed anything? Subhoodie asked with a smile. Golden Cicada pondered and said, This kind of power has indeed surpassed the scope of the eternal Tao, and it involves the word change that people can't comprehend. Life and death, withering and flourishing, destruction and rebirth, origin and end. There seem to be countless profound truths branded in it, but when you think about it carefully, it's like this chaos, indescribably empty, and it's really strange. Like chaos and emptiness, what a good like chaos. Subhoodie was surprised. I never thought that fellow Taoists could deduce so many profound principles from just a strand of Nirvana aura. Could it be that you've also touched the threshold of the Tao of life now? Golden Cicada was stunned, and said in a self-mocking manner, "If so, then it's great." Lin Sun glanced at Golden Cicada and said, "Senior, with such insight, why worry about being unable to take a step forward in the perfection stage of the boundless realm in the future? Perhaps Senior only needs a critical factor to be able to break through this layer of window paper." Golden Cicada couldn't help but let out a hearty smile and said, "Are the two of you trying to praise me to death? Let's not talk about this. Young Brother Lin has just arrived at the profound God domain, so I presume you have many questions in your heart. Moreover, I'm rather curious about young Brother Lin's cultivation as well, so we can seize this opportunity to have a good chat." Immediately, the three of them drank tea as they discussed the profound God domain, and it allowed Lin Sun to obtain a better understanding of this expanse of the heavens and the earth. It also allowed Lin Sun to finally understand that it was really as he'd inferred earlier. No matter if it was the Master of the Heart, Golden Cicada, Chun Shi, Chun Linkong, or the enemy experts like Absolute Beginning, all of them were waiting for the arrival of a variable like him. The reason was that everyone firmly believed that it was very likely that he who possessed the profundities of nirvana would have a chance to truly find a safe path that led to the forbidden area of profundity. In other words, in the eyes of everyone, the profundities of nirvana was like a key that could open the door to the forbidden area of profundity that had been tightly closed for countless years. Chapter 33:12. The forbidden area of profundity was the most dangerous and forbidden place in the ruins of profundity of the Tao. Since the ancient times until now, no one had dared to enter it. This included Chun Shi, Absolute Beginning, and that swordsman. For example, even after experiencing 100,000 years of probing and searching, Absolute Beginning had merely carried it out in the profound God domain, and his main body didn't dare take a step into it. In other words, with their cultivations, all of them were able to clearly sense the existence of the forbidden area of profundity in the profound God domain, but they were similarly able to sense the murderous aura within it. Entering it meant certain death. It was precisely because of this that they'd stayed dormant within the profound God domain for countless years, and they could only sense the aura within the forbidden area of profundity from afar in order to deduce and ponder the profundities within it, yet they didn't dare head there. But now, along with the arrival of Lin Sun, who possessed the profundities of rebirth, it allowed everyone in the profound God domain to realize that their opportunity had arrived. When he found out about all of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but go silent, and then he asked Subhoodie for guidance about the profundities of rebirth. Since the profundities of rebirth are so miraculous, then why would they appear in the world of darkness? How could such a grand Tao be related to entering the forbidden area of profundity? This was the question in Lin Sun's heart. Subhoodie thought for a moment before he said, "I entered the Tao with my mental state and established a core Tao, and all the techniques I wrote are related to the secrets of the mental state. But practically no one knows how I stepped foot onto the path of the Tao all those years ago." The nearby Golden Cicada couldn't help but speak with surprise. "Taoist brother, could it be that you obtained a master when you stepped foot onto the path of cultivation all those years ago?" Subhoodie shook his head and said, "It can't be considered to be a master, and it can be considered to be a form of fate towards the Tao." When he spoke up to hear, his eyes were suffused with an expression of recollection. "Before I stepped foot onto the path of the Tao, I was just a frustrated person that yearned to cultivate yet was unable to obtain it. I'd visited numerous places of cultivation, yet because my natural talent was stupid and my physique was too inferior, I was repeatedly rejected. I was naturally unwilling. At that time, I went to numerous places with the intention of finding a sect that could take me in and pass down profound techniques to me. But in the end, I wasn't able to accomplish my wish even when I was almost 100 years old." Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. He'd never imagined that his master had actually experienced such hardships before stepping onto the path of cultivation. Subhoodie continued, "Afterwards, I simply couldn't move any further. Given that my body was old and weak, my years of travel had caused my ki to be greatly depleted. I ended up being plagued by all sorts of illnesses, and in the end, I fell to the ground amidst the mountains and rivers. At that time, I had a premonition that death was imminent, but I didn't care at all. The only thing I was unwilling to accept was that I was unable to step through the threshold of the Tao, even though I'd spent my entire life trying to seek the Tao. At this point, Sub-Hoodie smiled slightly. It was also at that time that I encountered a stroke of Tao karmic luck. A young monkey who had just gained sentience appeared with a book in his arms. He humbly asked me for guidance, wanting to know what was written within this book. I took a look. That book was severely damaged, and only a dozen or so pages remained. The contents written on it were extremely messy. Fortunately, I recognized those words, so I read them out to the little monkey. After listening to it, it was extremely happy, which surprised me. Because the content of those words had long since been damaged, it was impossible to piece together the complete content. The little monkey, however, actually began to dance with joy. It was so happy that I asked it why it was so happy. The little monkey said that it recognized these words. These simple words, however, caused my heart to feel indescribably shaken. And then I told it that before I died, I could teach it how to read and write. The little monkey was very happy. From that day onwards, every time it came to find me, it would bring me mountain water and mountain fruits to fill its stomach, while I taught it how to read and write. I didn't expect that after so many years, not only would I not die, but all of my injuries would be healed. One day, the little monkey pointed at a complete sentence on that damaged book and asked me what it meant. I looked at it. It was understand the heart, see one's nature, understand the mysteries. I explained the meaning of this sentence to the little monkey. After hearing it, the little monkey then pointed at the heart character and asked, "How should I understand the heart?" In that moment, I was stunned. I didn't know how to respond. From that day onwards, I began to ponder what the heart was. After sitting there for 3 years, on a stormy and rainy night, I finally understood. Speaking of this, Sub-Hoodie's expression couldn't help but show a trace of absent-mindedness. It was an epiphany. It was as if I was suddenly enlightened. My mind became aware of the longitude and latitude between heaven and earth, the Taoist marks in the mountains and rivers, and the vitality in every blade of grass and every tree. At that time, it was as if a door to a whole new world had been opened. I finally understood what the so-called Great Way was. From then on, I embarked on a path of cultivation, and I also brought the little monkey with me. I traveled through the boundless great rivers, saw the myriad of Taoists in the world, discussed Zen with Buddhism, discussed scriptures with Confucianism, discussed Taoism with Taoism. Afterwards, I took the little monkey with me and established the core sect in the land of ultimate. Speaking of this, Sub-Hoodie looked at Lin Sun and said with a smile, "That little monkey is your eldest senior brother." A strange and subtle emotion arose in Lin Sun's heart. It turned out that this was how Master and eldest senior brother had formed their destiny. This was truly an indescribably wonderful Tao fate. Golden Cicada couldn't help but sigh with emotion. You don't seek help from others, but you comprehend the great way in your own heart. Taoist brothers' experience in the past is beyond our reach. Sub-Hoodie laughed with ridicule. "You're wrong. All those years ago, I begged countless sects in an attempt to step onto the path of the Tao, yet I was refused time and time again. I originally thought that I would die with regret, yet never had I imagined that I would unintentionally find such a fortuitous encounter in the Tao. Only in this way would the path of the Tao I seek be formed." After a pause, he said, "And at that time, after I established the core sect, I once went to the land of origin to explore the ultimate. I observed the changes of the 5 sequences of the ultimate and sensed the existence of nirvana with my state of mind." Nirvana of freedom? Golden Cicada's eyes were filled with a strange light. "No, it's the seed of nirvana." Master of the core sect said, "The ultimate can be regarded as the end and return of all the Taoists in the world. Every time the era changes, all the Taoists in the world enter the ultimate and turn into the power of origin. At that time, this nirvana was only a seed in the source of the ultimate. After many years of deduction, I can only infer that in this era, this nirvana will definitely be born in the world. Therefore, I left behind the Tao hymn of a solitary lotus. Lin Sun said, "But why did Master say in the Tao hymn that nirvana is related to the immortal supreme road?" Subhoodie laughed. "If I say that this nirvana is too powerful, it will cause too much noise. In that case, if existences like primordium are attracted, how can you get it?" Lin Sun was stunned and couldn't help laughing. Obviously, he also realized that when Master left this Tao hymn, he deliberately held back. Golden Cicada asked, "Taoist brother, what do you think? Do you know that this nirvana will be born in the dark world of the starry ancient road? A long time ago, I also walked around that place and didn't find anything special." Subhoodie said, "If you have entered the source of the ultimate, you will understand that the source power of the dark world is born in the ultimate. After I noticed this all those years ago, I deduced that the Tao of rebirth would surely appear in the world of darkness in the future. Thus, I asked my second disciple, Zhong Xiao, to hold down the fort there for the sake of preventing the Tao of rebirth from being seized away when it appeared." Golden Cicada was silent for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. In the end, the root of everything must be found in the ultimate. And when Taoist brother established the orthodoxy of core in the ultimate, you inadvertently made a move and learned some of the mysteries of the nirvana first. After a pause, Golden Cicada said, "But, Taoist brother, how do you know that little friend Lin can obtain this good fortune?" Subhoodie laughed. "Taoist brother, you are too optimistic. I never thought that my disciple would definitely obtain this good fortune. Speaking of which, Lin Sun can enter my orthodoxy of core because of his own fate, and not because I arranged it in advance." Golden Cicada thought for a moment and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This is fate indeed. It can't be forced or arranged. At this moment, Lin Sun asked, "Master, since no one knew the profundities of the Nirvana Tao all those years ago, then why do those enemies in the profound God domain seem to think that the Nirvana Tao is an unprecedented variable?" Before Subhoodie could answer, Golden Cicada smiled and said, "It's very simple. Since little friend Lin stepped foot onto the eternal Tao, the changes in your body have been noticed by the sovereign of absolute beginning since a long time ago. Of course, this is related to the natural talent you possess, Devourer of the Abyss. After all, you ought to be clearly aware that the eternal vessel flashed out from the forbidden area of profundity a very long time ago, and this treasure was obtained by your great-grandfather, Luo Tongtian, a very long time ago. On the other hand, you've inherited the natural talent of Devourer of the Abyss and possess the profundities of rebirth, so it's impossible for you to not be noticed." Only now did Lin Sun come to an understanding, and he recalled the scenes of him fighting the sovereign of absolute beginnings while within the door of eternity. Coupled with the information he obtained now, he came to a complete understanding in his heart. If he traced it back to its source, it was still the eternal vessel. It was like the core of karma, and it linked up the different threads of karma between absolute beginning, divine emperor, eternal night, summer solstice, and himself. This was also the reason why the sovereign of absolute beginning had asked him to hand over the profundities of rebirth, summer solstice, and the eternal vessel while he was at the spirit bestial world. Young brother Lin, now that you've arrived at the profound God domain, you ought to understand that the person behind the scenes of the calamity of an era is absolute beginning, and the grand silence life-saving tribulation that was born during the transition of an era came from the forbidden area of profundity. Golden Cicada said in a light voice, "According to our inference, no matter if it's for the sake of seeking the path towards the Tao or for the sake of ending this enmity that has lasted for a long time, absolute beginning will definitely use all his ability to deal with you, because he needs the profundities of rebirth in your possession, and he needs to reclaim the eternal vessel." Lin Sun's expression remained calm and wasn't really surprised, and he said casually, "I'd already thought about all of this before I came here, so I'm not afraid to fight him." Subhoodie said in a warm voice, "Don't be impatient. Even though the game has already begun, it still isn't the time to decide the victor. At the very least, no matter if it's us or absolute beginning, all of us want to see exactly how many profundities you who possess the Tao of Rebirth are able to comprehend from the forbidden area of profundity and what sort of changes you'll be able to cause. There's another chapter tonight. Chapter 33:13. Comprehend the aura of the forbidden area of profundity. Lin Sun was surprised. Exactly. The forbidden area of profundity is taken to be a restricted area for life, and according to rumor, a grand Tao that's even higher than the eternal Tao path exists here. Now that you've already taken this step and possessed the profundities of rebirth, it's extremely likely that this is a fortune to you. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Even Chun Shi and Absolute Beginning think this way. All of them want to see what sort of insights you can gain from it. This Absolute Beginning is quite interesting. Previously, after the ape ancestor's operation in front of the profound Tao stage suffered a setback, he did not take any further action. So it turns out that he had other preparations. Lin Sun chuckled and said, if that's the case, once I trigger some changes that are enough to arouse the interest of Absolute Beginning when I'm comprehending the Forbidden Land of Wonders, it's time to decide the winner of this game. Of course. However, I suggest that you make a trip to the primordial spirit world before you comprehend the aura of the forbidden grounds of wonders. Lin Sun nodded. He understood what his master meant. Chun Shi was the only existence in the profound God domain that was capable of threatening the absolute beginning realm. In these countless years of time, he'd surely sensed the aura within the forbidden area of profundity on many occasions, and he definitely had a great understanding of it. If he could learn from him, it would naturally be beneficial. Young brother, seeking guidance is seeking guidance. In my opinion, when you truly comprehend the aura of the forbidden area of profundity, it's better for you to return to the hidden world. Golden Cicada suddenly said. Sub-Hoodie couldn't help but feel rather surprised. Why do you say that, fellow Taoist? Jean Chan went silent for a short moment before he said, perhaps I'm thinking too much. As far as I'm concerned, Absolute Beginning has an obsession towards the profundities of rebirth, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Chun Shi doesn't have any thoughts in his heart. He paused for a moment and continued. Even if he doesn't have any thoughts now, but if young brother Lin causes some changes that are sufficient to tempt Chun Shi when you sense the forbidden area of profundity. He didn't finish his sentence, but the meaning behind his words was very clear. Sub-Hoodie frowned. He stared at the cicada for a moment, then said, fellow Taoist, your concerns are reasonable. Jean Chan smiled bitterly and said, I'm just worried that I'll be seen as a petty person who gauges the heart of a gentleman with a yardstick of a petty person and be criticized by others. Truthfully speaking, I feel extreme admiration and reverence towards fellow Taoist Chun Shi in my heart. An existence like him that adheres to the Tao of samsara and walks on a boundless path towards the Tao is far from someone I can slander or suspect. But there are too many variables in this battle. We can't afford to be careless. Sub-Hoodie nodded, then looked at Lin Sun. What do you think? Lin Sun said with a smile. Although I don't know Senior Chun Shi, I know Senior Chun Linkong. In my opinion, they won't have any other intentions. Of course, Senior Golden Cicada is right. The current situation is indeed a matter of life and death. It is necessary to be careful. I'll naturally return to Hidden Dimension after I seek guidance from Senior Chun Shi. Jean Chan smiled and said, I hope I'm just overthinking it. Without further delay, Lin Sun turned around and walked out of the hidden realm. Until Lin Sun's figure disappeared, Sub-Hoodie looked at Jean Chan and said, fellow Taoist, in the past, you never suspected others for no reason. Could it be that you've discovered something? Jean Chan was startled and couldn't help but smile bitterly. He said, as the saying goes, concern leads to confusion. Perhaps it was because I was too concerned about fellow Taoist Lin that I said such rude words. Sub-Hoodie nodded. Indeed, concern leads to confusion. Every move of my disciple is related to the change of the entire situation. To be honest, it makes my heart faintly uneasy. As he spoke, he sighed, I entered the Tao with my heart, but I never thought that my state of mind would be unable to truly calm down at such a time. Jean Chan said in a warm voice, "At such a time, not only you and I, but also Tai Chu and Chun Shi. It's impossible for them to really be indifferent." After a long moment of silence, the master of the heart course said, "I've divined it before, and the unease in my heart might be because I've sensed an ominous omen. However, the omen is hidden very deeply, and it's very difficult to detect. No matter how I think about it, I think the beginning still has an unpredictable trump card in his hand, and it's coming for me." Golden Cicada narrowed his eyes. After that, the core master shook his head and said, "Forget it. Let's not talk about all of that. If my life can be exchanged for victory in this battle, then it's worth it." Golden Cicada said softly, "Brother, Lin Sun is a variable. As long as he is there, the ominous feeling you have will not be irresolvable." Subhoodie nodded, no longer discussing this topic. Walking out of the hidden realm, Lin Sun instantly felt that there was an obscure and mysterious aura sweeping out from the distant Taihan realm and looking at him from a distance. This was undoubtedly the aura of absolute beginning. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "What? Do you want to do it now?" "No, I just want to take this opportunity to tell you something related to the Forbidden Land of Wonders." The voice of absolute beginning resounded between heaven and earth. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "You're eager for me to reflect more mysteries from the Forbidden Land of Wonders?" "My little friend Lin knows me well." Absolute beginning laughed. "The greater the variable you bring, isn't it also a variable for me? You don't have to worry about me having other thoughts in this matter before the outcome of the battle is decided." As he spoke, a green divine rainbow flashed over from the distant void, and it transformed into a jade slip 300 meters in front of Lin Sun. This jade slip contains all my experiences in comprehending the Forbidden Land of Wonders in the mysterious God territory. You can take it and study it, or you can ignore it. After that, the voice dissipated between heaven and earth, and even the aura that emerged from the Taihan realm disappeared along with it. Lin Sun couldn't help but ponder. 300 meters away, the jade slip floated quietly. It seemed that absolute beginning didn't care whether Lin Sun took it or not. "If I don't take it, then it would seem that I'm afraid. If I take it, then I'll owe you a small favor. If I take it and don't comprehend it, then it would seem that I'm afraid. If I take it and comprehend it, then I'll owe you even more." Lin Sun seemed to be muttering to himself. Right at this moment, hearty laughter resounded. "Ha ha ha, you don't even want to owe me a favor, and that's why you're telling me all of this, right?" The voice was clear and bright, like the morning bell. Lin Sun smiled and cupped his hands as he said, "I knew I wouldn't be able to hide it from Senior's discerning eyes. Come quickly. I've been waiting for you for a very long time. As for this jade slip, I'll help you take it. In this way, you won't have to be in a dilemma, and your thoughts will be clear." The clear laughter was still reverberating through the surroundings when the jade slip that floated 300 m away from Lin Sun had been put away by an invisible force. This voice naturally came from Chun Shi. Lin Sun cupped his hands once more when he saw this, and then he flashed towards the primordial world. In next to no time, his figure stepped into the chaotic vortex passageway that led to the primordial world. Primordial world. Deep underground, Tai Chu smiled. He reached out to tug at the sword chains that bound his body. Listening to the clanking of the chains, he couldn't help but mutter, "Fellow Taoist, it's a pity that you're not here. Otherwise, today's situation is bound to be even more interesting." Primordial world. When Lin Sun entered, Chun Linkong was already waiting for him. "Little friend Lin, you're finally here. My grandfather has been waiting for you for a long time," Chun Linkong said with a smile as he led the way forward. Lin Sun couldn't help but look forward to it. Back in the divine city of fortune, when he was comprehending the mysteries of the fortune star, he had seen Senior Chun Shi's graceful bearing. That person wore a jade-green robe and carried an ancient sword on his back. As he walked the long river of time, he exuded an unparalleled bearing. Not long ago, when he was in the mortal transformation world, he saw 3 Dharma images in the void above the sky. One of them was left behind by Senior Chun Shi. Merely the might that surged from that Dharma image was sufficient to make Lin Sun sigh with amazement. It was even to the extent that the inheritances of the Tao markings he possessed were inseparably related to Chen Shi. After all, Master Lu's master was Oracle Mountain, and Senior Chen, she was the strongest disciple in the history of Oracle Mountain. Now, he finally had the chance to meet such a supreme legend. So how could Lin Sun not look forward to it? Since my grandfather defeated the sovereign sect's master all those years ago, his disposition became indifferent and leisurely. Up until now, even I don't know exactly how formidable his cultivation is. Chun Linkong smiled as he spoke on the way, and his face was filled with pride and admiration. The sovereign sect's master? Lin Sun was stunned. Right, he established the sovereign sect and cultivated the sovereign Tao of indifference. He entered the Tao without emotion, and he's extremely terrifying. All those years ago, my grandfather exhausted a great deal of effort in order to suppress him with the Tao of samsara, causing him to fall into the cycle of samsara forever and suffer the pain of being unable to transcend. We're here. When he spoke up to here, Chun Linkong instantly shut his mouth. On a nearby mountain, a tall and handsome figure stood before the thatched cottage. The figure wore azure clothes and had his hands behind his back. He seemed like a pine tree at the edge of a cliff, and he was looking over here. It was Chun Shi, a supreme legend whose name shook numerous eras. Go cultivate. Don't even take a step out of this place of cultivation without my permission. Chun Shi's casual words caused Chun Linkong's entire body to stiffen, and then he turned around and left obediently. I'm Chun Shi. Greetings, little brother Lin. In the distance, Chun Shi cupped his fists slightly and spoke with a smile on his face. His gaze was clear like the ocean, deep and tranquil, and his tone was calm, yet carried the energy to calm the hearts of others. Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, Greetings, senior. Chun Shi said with a smile, There's no need to talk about seniority between us, and we should take each other as friends of the great Tao. Please come over and have a chat. Lin Sun nodded and immediately moved forward. There was a table and 2 bamboo chairs before the thatched cottage. After Lin Sun took a seat, Chun Shi asked with a smile, Would you like some wine or tea? I'm very happy to be able to meet Senior, so I'll naturally drink, said Lin Sun with a smile. Chun Shi didn't mind at all when he heard Lin Sun call him Senior. It was just a form of address, so there was no need to make a fuss about it. He took a seat as well, and with a flip of his palm, a jug of wine and 2 wine cups appeared on the table. This is the wine brewed by my wife, Qing Xiui. I've been reluctant to drink it for many years in the profound God domain, and it's only because of little brother's arrival this time that I'm willing to go all out. Ha! Chun Shi smiled as he spoke, and he'd already opened the jug of wine and filled both Lin Sun and himself. Instantly, a strand of refreshing and cold wine fragrance suffused the air. Come, let's have a drink first. Chun Shi raised his cup. Lin Sun smiled and raised his cup as well. When their wine cups touched, it just happened to be like a meeting on the Great Path. It was all in silence. The 4th chapter was delivered. The main character of the Talisman Emperor, Chun Shi, and the main character of the Heavenly Tao, Lin Sun, have finally met. I'm quite happy in my heart. Chapter 33:14. Before the thatched cottage. Lin Sun felt very relaxed as he chatted and drank wine with Chun Shi. When he finished a jug of wine, Chun Shi put down his wine cup and sighed with satisfaction as he said, I remember drinking wine with that swordsman the last time I drank wine. He drank all 39 jugs of wine in my collection, yet he still wasn't satisfied and asked for more. How could I allow him to do as he wished? I said I'd treat him to another round of drinks when he returned from reincarnation, and I guaranteed he'd drink to his heart's content. In the blink of an eye, numerous eras have passed. His eyes were suffused with a disappointed expression. Senior, why don't you treat me to a round of drinks as well? Lin Sun chuckled as he spoke. Chun Shi smiled as well and said, Why not? However, we have to wait until the curtains to this game are drawn. He paused for a moment and continued. There's something you're unaware of. If that swordsman didn't intend to reincarnate all those years ago, then I would definitely not treat him to so much wine. Lin Sun was stunned, And then he said, "Senior, to tell you the truth, I have some understanding of the grand Tao of samsara. However, I haven't grasped its core profundities, so I still don't dare believe that samsara really exists in the world." Chun, she had a strange expression as he said, "No one told you that I've grasped the complete profundities of samsara? Moreover, it was I who sent that swordsman off when he reincarnated?" Lin Sun laughed bitterly and said, "I really don't know about that." Chun, she said, "Then you ought to know about the river diagram, right?" Lin Sun nodded. "I've seen the power of this treasure in Fortune Divine City." Chun, she smiled and said, "The complete grand Tao of samsara comes from this treasure, the river diagram. When I was cultivating in the past, those who possessed the river diagram were taken to be saviors of an era. However, I only deduced later on that the energy of samsara came from the river diagram. When I arrived at the ruins of Myriad Tao, I finally deduced that the river diagram came from within the forbidden area of profundity." Lin Sun was surprised. "Isn't that just like the eternal arc?" Chun, she nodded. "Exactly. Samsara is related to the secrets of reincarnation and rebirth, so it ought to be considered as a Tao of life." Lin Sun came to a sudden understanding. On the other hand, Chun, she had already withdrawn a jade slip, and it was exactly the jade slip that Absolute Beginning had left behind. "Young brother, I'm already clearly aware of your objective in coming here. In a while, I'll naturally tell you about some of the comprehensions and experiences I obtained while sensing the forbidden area of profundity in these past few years." Chinshi played with the jade slip and said, "However, before that, why don't we take a look at the comprehensions and experiences Absolute Beginning left behind?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "I'm also curious." Chun, she didn't waste his breath and sent a strand of his divine sense into the jade slip. After a long time, he put the jade slip away while a trace of a strange expression suffused the space between his brows, and he said after a short while, "Young brother, take a look as well." As he spoke, he passed the jade slip over. Lin Sun also divided a strand of his spiritual awareness to explore it. In an instant, numerous comprehensions appeared like tidewater. All of these comprehensions came from the Absolute Beginning, and it was something he'd obtained while sensing the forbidden area of profundity for countless years. There were numerous inconceivable scenes amidst these comprehensions, but practically all of them were enveloped by the aura of chaos, causing them to seem blurry, illusory, and indistinguishable. It was like looking at flowers through mist. On the other hand, some of the comprehensions within the jade slip were deduced from these scenes. After a long time, Lin Sun withdrew his divine sense as well, and his heart trembled slightly. According to these comprehensions and deduced profundities, Absolute Beginning obtained an understanding. The forbidden area of profundity had three meanings. Firstly, it was the quintessence that gave birth to the Tao of life, and there existed a complete Tao of life. Secondly, it was the quintessence core of the ruins of profundity of Tao. Just like the quintessence core of the ruins of creation was the river of the era, the quintessence core of the ruins of end was the 5 mountains of the ruins of end, and the quintessence core of the Kunlun ruins was the sea of destiny. Thirdly, it was one of the quintessences of a complete chaos. The first was very easy to understand because Lin Sun had made a similar inference earlier. The second was very easy to understand by combining the relationship between the 4 ruins of Tao. The forbidden area of profundity was in existence just like the river of the era, the 5 mountains of the ruins of end, and the sea of destiny. It was the quintessence of the ruins of profundity of Tao. Only the third was something that Lin Sun had never expected. One of the quintessences of a complete chaos. In the eyes of Absolute Beginning, the so-called chaos could accommodate the number of eras. It could contain endless great ways. It could give birth to countless worlds, and it could reproduce endless lives. Just like the starry sky, ancient path, the boundless world, and the eternal world. These worlds all belong to the Lingwu era. This could be regarded as an epoch of civilization. And before the Lingwu era, there were more epic civilizations. Various epic civilizations carried various cultivation civilizations and the great ways of heaven. But in the end, All the epic civilizations were contained in a chaos. This chaos was not the so-called chaos quintessences when a small world was born, nor was it a law of the chaos quintessences. It was like a mother, and it carried the changes of eras, civilizations, grandiose, and lives. Such a chaos quintessences could be regarded as a chaos era. A chaos era included the epic civilizations, great ways, lives, the circulation of all things, and the endless vicissitudes of life. No matter if it was the immortal era, devil era, Buddha era, or shaman era, all these epic civilizations that had appeared in the past were only a part of the chaos era. There were 4 quintessences in a chaos era. They were respectively life, destiny, creation, and ultimate. In other words, in this chaos era, the quintessences of the ruins of profundity, Kunlun ruins, creation ruins, and ultimate ruins were the 4 quintessences that formed the entire chaos era. Amongst them, the quintessences of life were the core of the chaos era, and it was a supreme path towards the Tao that was practically impossible for cultivators in the world to come into contact with. On the other hand, the 3 quintessences of creation, destiny, and ultimate had evolved into the change of eras, the cycle of destiny, and the final destination of all things. On the other hand, the 4 quintessences were related to each other, and none of them could be lacking. Just like the 4 ruins of Tao, the energy between them formed a complete synergy that circulated in an orderly manner, thus maintaining the operation of the entire chaos era. This was the profundity that absolute beginning had comprehended from the forbidden area of profundity in the countless years of time. After he found out about all of this, it allowed Lin Sun to obtain an answer to all the questions in his heart. For example, the existence and relationship of the 4 ruins of Tao. But at the same time, he felt a great deal of shock, because many of the profundities amongst them were things that he'd never heard of in the past. "How do you feel?" Chun Shi asked with a smile on his face as he watched Lin Sun gradually calm down from his contemplation. "I have to admit that absolute beginning is extremely formidable." Lin Sun weighed his words and said, "Even if he's an opponent, I have to say that he possesses extraordinary attainments in seeking the Grand Tao." Chun Shi nodded and said, "Absolute beginning is formidable indeed, and he's an extremely terrifying opponent. A very long time ago, he once intended to leave this world and refine the ultimate ruins, Kunlun ruins and creation ruins, into his own Grand Tao. According to his thoughts, if he's able to refine these 3 ruins of Tao and fuse them into his own path, then it would be sufficient for him to possess the ability to refine the ruins of Tao." Lin Sun gasped. "This fellow is actually so crazy. This is a method to him to seek the Tao. However, if he really does this, then all the cultivators of the various eras and countless living beings in this world will suffer a calamity. In other words, if that time really comes, then besides him, absolute beginning, all the other living beings in this world will suffer calamity." Chun Shi spoke casually. Lin Sun said abruptly, "The absolute beginning laws that enveloped the surroundings of the ruins of creation wouldn't have been set up by absolute beginning for the sake of refining the quintessence of creation, right?" "Exactly." Chun Shi smiled and said, "After I noticed all of this all those years ago, I made a trip there and established the divine city of creation. I suppressed the quintessence of creation within it and protected it with the river diagram. In this way, I was able to obstruct the energy that belonged to absolute beginning that enveloped the surroundings of the ruins of creation." Only now did Lin Sun finally understand why the ruins of creation would be trapped under the absolute beginning laws. Who would have imagined that absolute beginning would actually be so crazy as to completely refine the 3 ruins of Tao? This fellow actually seems to be willing to disregard everything for the sake of seeking the Tao. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. "Chun," she said, "if it wasn't for that, then that swordsman wouldn't have transformed his cultivation into a sword lock and suppressed absolute beginning within the grand chaos dimension all those years ago. He was worried that absolute beginning would leave the ruins of Tao and bring calamity to the world." He paused for a moment and said, but I can't deny that absolute beginning is an opponent that deserves respect. Even I deeply admire his understanding of the grand Tao and his eternal desire to seek the Tao. Lin Sun nodded, and then he said, Senior, in your opinion, what do you think of absolute beginning's comprehensions and deductions towards the forbidden area of profundity? Shi went silent for a short moment before he said, He didn't tamper with these comprehensions because I've already comprehended the profundities he comprehended. In other words, he actually caused me to feel a sense of sympathy towards him in terms of my understanding of the forbidden area of profundity. As soon as he finished speaking, he let out a long sigh. Unfortunately, even though our understanding of the Grand Tao is similar, our paths toward the Tao are different, and our pursuits are conflicting. As the saying goes, our Taoists can't coexist, and we can't be friends in the end. Lin Sun said, It's usually the enemy that understands you the best. This saying can be applied to absolute beginning as well. In the end, this battle is bound to have a victor. Shi said, It's still early to decide the victor. I'll seize this opportunity to discuss some insights I've gained with young brother. Lin Sun said with a smile, I'm all ears. The absolute beginning felt that the forbidden area of profundity contained the grand Tao of life, and he took the grand Tao of life to be the core quintessence of a chaotic era. But in my opinion, this grand Tao of life should be called the primordial Tao path. The primordial path of the Tao? Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. Exactly. The so-called primordial path is the core of a chaotic era, and it's the origin of life. For example, if a chaotic era is an egg, then the primordial energy is the egg yolk, and all Taoists of life are born from it. As he spoke, Shi spoke about some of the profundities he'd comprehended throughout the countless years of time. Chapter 33:15. Lin Sun listened quietly and occasionally asked questions. Shi patiently answered them one by one. Besides that, he would discuss some profundities that Shi had sensed it was unable to figure out with Lin Sun. Both of them benefited from this. Unknowingly, several days had already passed. Through the discussion of the Tao, Shi obtained an understanding of Lin Sun's knowledge of the Grand Tao and the attainments he possessed now, and he sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. In the end, Shi couldn't help but look forward to what sort of gains Lin Sun would obtain when he really went to sense the forbidden area of profundity. Senior, I intend to return to the hidden world right away and start sensing the profundities of the forbidden area of profundity. On this day, Lin Sun made a decision. Shi was stunned, and then he agreed with a smile on his face. He withdrew a sword-shaped jade slip and passed it to Lin Sun. This is some of the experiences left behind by that swordsman all those years ago, and the content within it isn't much different from what we've talked about in these past few days. But you can comprehend and ponder over it yourself, and perhaps you'll be able to figure out some different profundities. Lin Sun took it with both hands and cupped his hands to express his thanks. Shi immediately personally sent Lin Sun off, and his brows couldn't help but raise slightly as he watched Lin Sun's figure vanish through the exit of the primordial dimension while he fell into deep thought. Grandfather, why did Lin Sun leave? Chun Linkong hurried over from afar. Shi glanced at him and said, Didn't I say you can't leave the place of cultivation? Chun Linkong was embarrassed and said, I just wanted to say hello to Lin Sun when he was about to leave. Let's go. Shi turned around and walked towards his residence. Grandfather, you haven't told me why Lin Sun left. Chun Linkong caught up to him and asked, Doesn't he know that comprehending the aura of the forbidden land of wonders in the primordial spirit world is the safest? At the very least, if something unexpected happens, Grandfather will be able to help him resolve it. Maybe he has other ideas. Shi spoke casually. You have other ideas? Chun Linkong wasn't stupid. He pondered for a moment and frowned. Is he guarding against us? On guard. Shi laughed. Not really. You don't have to think too much about it, right? What do you think of Sub Hoodie's character? Chun Linkong thought for a moment and said, No matter if it's breadth of mind or boldness, they can be said to be rare in the world. Even his attainments in the Grand Tao are more formidable than mine. If he hadn't left his Tao, karmic avatar, in the heavenly cycle Tao, law back in the mortal transformation realm, his accomplishments would have been far greater. Thinking of this, he felt a wave of emotion in his heart. Back then, when Subhuti entered the mortal transformation realm, he had the opportunity to place his Tao karmic aspect above the heavenly cycle Tao laws. In this way, when he challenged the 9 heavenly trials of the myriad spirits God domain, he wouldn't obtain a Tao fruit of chaos, but the quintessence of chaos. In that case, with Subhuti's wisdom and methods, he would probably have the chance to take a step out of the level of the boundless realm when he arrived at the profound God domain. Subhuti, however, hadn't done so. Only now did Chun Linkong understand that Subhuti had left his karmic Tao idol within the cycle Tao laws for the sake of helping his disciple, Lin Sun. A teacher for a day, a father for life. Subhuti once said that from the time Lin Sun entered Fengxun Mountain when he was young until now, he had never received any guidance or teaching from Subhuti. Perhaps it was precisely because of this that he felt indebted to Lin Sun. This was also the reason why he had left his karmic Tao manifestation in the heavenly cycle Tao law back in the mortal transformation realm, giving Lin Sun an extraordinary teaching. However, he didn't know if Lin Sun had thought of this or if he had realized how great the effort and price Subhuti had paid for this was. Just as Chun Linkong's thoughts were drifting, Chun Shi's voice rang in his ears again. Then, what kind of person do you think Golden Cicada is? Golden Cicada? Chun Linkong was stunned for a moment before he said, "He's extremely extraordinary. Since I've known him until now, I've never seen him truly utilize his full strength to do something, and it seems like anything can be easily dealt with before him. It's even to the extent that I'm often curious about exactly how formidable his cultivation is." As he spoke, he smiled. Subhuti once said that Golden Cicada's Tao is higher than the heavens. As far as I'm concerned, Golden Cicada's Tao is unfathomable. A golden cicada that traversed through the various eras was praised by both you and Subhuti. I presume he's in existence with great ability. Chun Shi nodded and said, "Unfortunately, since he entered the profound God domain, he's always been lying dormant in the hidden world, and it's to the extent that I haven't been able to meet him until now." Chun Linkong shook his head and said, "Golden Cicada can only be blamed. I've invited him to the primordial world on many occasions, yet he politely refused." Chun Shi said, "Everyone on the Grand Tao has a strange temper. Never mind, let's not mention him." He turned around to glance at Chun Linkong. "Why are you still following me? Go and cultivate." Chun Linkong said, "Grandfather, Lin Sun is about to comprehend the profundities of the forbidden area of profundity, and this game has arrived at the most critical moment. Under such circumstances, how could I have the mood to cultivate?" Chun Shi shook his head and didn't say anything further before turning around and walking into his cottage. On the other hand, Chun Linkong started laughing as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. On the way back to the hidden world, Absolute Beginning's voice suddenly sounded out from within the grand chaos world. "Fellow Taoist, in your opinion, between me and Chun Shi, who's stronger in terms of comprehension toward the forbidden area of profundity? Is your desire to win so heavy?" Lin Sun laughed. "No, I was just curious about what sort of evaluation I would obtain from you." Absolute Beginning chuckled as he said, "But now, I don't want to know. After all, you take Chun Shi to be your friend, so you naturally think that Chun Shi is stronger than me. Since you know that, then why ask?" Lin Sun's brows raised as he spoke. "I was just unable to restrain myself from being delighted by my prey." "Ha ha." Absolute Beginning's carefree laughter resounded through the heavens and the earth, and it only gradually died down after a long time. Lin Sun shook his head, and then he turned around and walked into the hidden world. "How was your harvest this time?" Subhuti and Golden Cicada came over to greet him at the first possible moment. "I obtained a great deal." Lin Sun said, "Master, I intend to enter into closed-door cultivation for a period of time from today onwards, and then I'll start comprehending the aura of the forbidden area of profundity." "All right." Sub-Hoodie nodded. Little friend, don't be too hasty. Just follow your heart. Golden Cicada advised in a gentle voice. Golden Cicada admonished in a warm voice. Since this day onwards, Lin Sun had started cultivating in meditation within the hidden world. He sat alone at the side of a cliff as he reviewed the bits and pieces of his cultivation since he was young, and he calmly sorted out his attainments in the Grand Tao in the past. The numerous battles, the numerous tribulations, the numerous joys and sorrows, all of them appeared in Lin Sun's heart, and he captured their profundities before deducing their karma and summarizing their attainments. He was sorting out his past, comprehending and consolidating his own path towards the Tao. 1 month later, Lin Sun sorted it out once more. But this time he used the path towards the Tao of every single realm as a guideline, and he categorized and summarized his mental state, soul, Tao body, and will. Every single time he came to a conclusion, it allowed him to have a different feeling and comprehension towards the path he'd been pursuing in the past. Time passed by day. At the side of the cliff, Lin Sun's figure that sat there motionlessly like a rock, and his aura was completely silent, as if he'd vanished from the heavens and the earth. Until one day, he suddenly opened his eyes, and then a wisp of an indescribably profound aura appeared on his deathly silent figure. The chaotic aura that enveloped the dim world seemed to be dyed with a layer of bright vitality. The entire hidden world was surging with a mysterious force that converged towards Lin Sun, cheering and jumping around him. The mountains and rivers resonated and produced a strange rhythm along with Lin Sun's breathing. But Lin Sun's body was empty. There was no aura, no power, and not even a trace of power. At this moment, he was like a chaos, indescribable and indescribable. Bodhi and Golden Cicada, who resided in this world, were also shocked by this mysterious phenomenon at the first time. They looked at each other, and then looked at Lin Sun, who was on the edge of the cliff in the distance. The great chaos is empty, Golden Cicada murmured, and an indescribable expression appeared between his brows. He sighed with emotion. Young brother Lin's attainments are completely unfathomable. How fortunate I am to have such a successor. Bodhi's heart was filled with gratification. Master, Senior Golden Cicada. On the cliff, Lin Sun stood up, and he looked towards the distance as he spoke with a smile. Next, I'll be going to comprehend the aura of the forbidden area of profundity. During this period of time, I have something to hold on to, so even if a battle of life and death occurs, there's no need to worry about me. Bodhi nodded with a smile. All right. Golden Cicada cupped his hands from afar. After that, Lin Sun raised his eyes to look towards the sky. His body was empty, yet his soul was like a divine ray of light that shot into the sky. It flashed out of the hidden world, passed through the layer upon layer of chaotic chi in the profound God domain, and flashed towards the boundless depths, the grand chaos realm. A wave of intense sounds of chains colliding suddenly resounded from the depths of the ground. Absolute beginning laughed with anticipation. It's finally here. Let me see what sort of changes will occur in the forbidden area of profundity because of the arrival of this variable. Heya, who stood alone on a branch, couldn't help but be excited, and he muttered, "The outcome is finally going to be decided. I've waited for too long." The nearby ape ancestor, who sat cross-legged on the ground, raised his head slightly and looked towards the distance. His expression was filled with indifference, and only a strand of flames surged in the depths of his eyes. He withdrew the swords on his back, and then he pressed his palms together. Clang! The black and white Tao swords actually combined into one, and they transformed into a chaotic Tao sword. Chun-Shi, do you know that I've been waiting for this day for a very long time? Ape Ancestor muttered in his heart. The primordial world. Chen Linkong suddenly raised his head and said, "Grandfather, it has begun." Chun-Shi's clear voice sounded out from within the thatched cottage. The time to decide the outcome has indeed arrived, but it's merely the beginning. Let's continue watching. His calm voice carried a trace of anticipation. At this moment, even the founding ancestors of the four ancestral halls, Primordial, Void, Heaven Shaman, And sure, and the 9 Lord of the Destiny Tao Lords of the 9 divisions of absolute beginning had sensed this, and their bodies shook. They'd realized that this battle had already entered into the moment where the outcome would be decided. Chapter 33:16. Lin Sun's divine sense was like a ray of light that traversed the boundless space and ceaselessly moved forward, and it passed through countless spaces that were suffused with chaos after an unknown period of time. Suddenly, he saw a seemingly boundlessly large, chaotic space, and a strand of a dangerous aura appeared along with it, and it was filled with the aura of a taboo. A strong premonition arose in Lin Sun's heart. Entering it would mean certain death. But Lin Sun wasn't alarmed, and he was delighted instead. He knew that a very long time ago, Chun Shi, absolute beginning, and that swordsman had sensed this forbidden aura that was dangerous to the point others didn't dare take a step past it. This was sufficient to prove that the chaotic space he saw now was the forbidden area of profundity. Without any worries or hesitation, Lin Sun's divine sense was like a sharp bolt of lightning that tore through the mist, and it flashed directly towards the forbidden area of profundity. When his divine sense entered the forbidden area of profundity that was covered in chaos, Lin Sun suddenly had an indescribable feeling, and it was as if he'd followed the path of the Grand Tao and entered the nest of the Tao. The boundlessly vast chaos was filled with traces of the Tao, and there was utterly no need to experience it, comprehend it, or search for it before one could naturally sense it. But at the same time, an unknown and dangerous aura coiled around this chaotic world, and it was filled with the aura of taboo and destruction. Amidst that dangerous aura, there's a strand of the quintessence aura that belongs to the deathless tribulation. In an instant, Lin Sun captured the familiar dangerous breath. Early on in Tribulation Realm, Lin Sun had comprehended the essence and profundities of tribulation from the quintessence of chaos in this realm. The changes in the world and the passage of time in the world all contained the aura of tribulation. It was precisely because of the existence of tribulation that everything in the world revealed a form of opposition and balance between life and death, destruction and rebirth. There was no good or evil in tribulations, but all life had tribulations. Those that dealt with the tribulations could obtain fortune, and those that experienced the tribulations and perished were nothing. On the other hand, the deathless tribulation was the same. It possessed the word fate, and it was a fate tribulation that targeted boundless realm cultivators. It was born during the passage of eras, and just like the 5 signs of Tao, it was a universal law of the Grand Tao that existed in the world. However, after Absolute Beginning comprehended the quintessence of the tribulation in the past, he possessed the ability to borrow and interfere with a lifespan tribulation in the profound God domain. For example, the emissary of destiny and the bell of absolute beginning that appeared in the great silence lifeless tribulation were actually techniques from the absolute beginning. And the great silence lifeless tribulation was related to the Tao of life. This also meant that any boundless realm existence that emerged in this chaos era would face this tribulation. He wasn't deliberately targeting anyone. Those who transcended tribulation would live, while those who resisted would die. This was the Tao of life. While thinking, Lin Sun's spiritual awareness had already swept along the breath of the great silence, fateless disaster. Gradually, his divine sense sensed the aura of the grand silence, nothingness tribulation within the chaos that was growing stronger and stronger, and it caused him to be unable to avoid feeling horrified. After that, his divine sense seemed to have flashed into a violent world of tribulation, and the phenomena of tribulation were everywhere. Bolts of lightning danced about violently, while lightning flickered, and destructive chaotic flows of energy swept through space. It was a terrifying scene. At the same time that Lin Sun's mind was suppressed, he also felt waves of indescribable comprehension. This was indeed the source of the grand silence, lifeless tribulation, and it was branded with the various secrets of this tribulation. In Lin Sun's divine sense, he saw the shadow of a bell. This shadow was completely condensed from the source energy of the grand silence, lifeless tribulation, and it floated in this world. It was indescribably huge, and it seemed to fill every inch of space. But when he looked carefully, it was only 9 inches tall. The bell of absolute beginning. Lin Sun was shocked in his heart. No, this is only a shadow formed from the grand silence, lifeless tribulation, and the real bell of absolute beginning is no longer here. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun understood that the absolute beginning must have sensed this world and had insight into the power of the grand silence, lifeless tribulation. For the sake of utilizing the power of this tribulation, he'd once placed the bell of absolute beginning in this world, and had experienced the tempering and infiltration of the grand silence, lifeless tribulation day and night. In this way, a unique connection was formed between the grand primordium bell and the quintessence energy of the grand desolation calamity. Thus, absolute beginning only needed to utilize the grand primordium bell to easily utilize the energy of the grand desolation calamity. When I've seen through it and seen through it, it's nothing special. Lin Sun's divine sense directly left this world and continued flashing towards the depths of the forbidden area of profundity. All along the way, he sensed numerous profound and unbelievable auras, and those auras contained energies that were rather familiar to him. There was creation, destiny, karma, time, and space. Lin Sun was shocked in his heart when he noticed the aura of the spiritination world, and then his divine sense flashed over. Sure enough, it wasn't long before he sensed the source energy of the spiritination world within the chaos. It really is exactly the same as what I saw within the door of eternity. Absolute beginning was right. The spiritination world is located at a corner of the forbidden area of profundity. However, my divine sense is merely able to sense it, and it's unable to interfere. Lin Sun recalled the scenes of him fighting with absolute beginning's will in the spiritination world, and he couldn't help but feel slightly strange in his heart. At that time, was absolute beginning's divine sense watching all of this as well? After a short moment, Lin Sun's divine sense continued sensing forward. However, along with the passage of time, he started to feel strenuous because the forbidden area of profundity was too large, and it simply seemed as if it had no boundaries. With the strength of my soul, I should be able to persist for a period of time. Lin Sun didn't intend to stop sensing, and his divine sense continued flashing forward. All along the way, he'd combined the experiences of absolute beginning, Chun Shi, and the swordsman, and he naturally comprehended its profundities when he sensed some profundities. This should be the energy of samsara. Suddenly, Lin Sun's divine sense captured a trace of an unusual and mysterious aura, and he sensed along the aura. Instantly, he seemed to have seen a complete cycle of reincarnation, and there were the alternating cycles of life and death, oblivion, reincarnation, termination, rebirth, and various other unbelievable scenes surging into appearance. It really is, as Senior Chun Shi said, samsara is a type of life Tao, and his river diagram treasure was definitely born from the quintessence of samsara. A few days ago, Lin Sun had once discussed the profundities of the samsara Tao with Chun Shi, and Chun Shi didn't conceal anything and shared his understanding and comprehensions of the samsara Tao with Lin Sun. This allowed Lin Sun to intentionally recognize the secrets of samsara. So, when he sensed the energy of the quintessence of samsara at this moment, Lin Sun had a different kind of understanding in his heart. Reading a myriad of books was inferior to traveling a myriad of miles. Consulting and discussing with Chun Shi was a type of gain, and when he experienced it himself, this sort of gain transformed into a type of comprehension that was accumulated in his own attainments in the Tao. After a long time, Lin Sun's divine sense flashed forward once more. He'd forgotten the passage of time, or perhaps the passage of time in the ordinary sense didn't exist in the forbidden area of profundity at all. On the other hand, his divine sense sensed more and more obscure and profound profundities as it flew, and it caused him to sometimes exclaim with admiration, sometimes be immersed in it, sometimes be horrified, and sometimes have the feeling of sudden enlightenment. In the end, Lin Sun finally dared confirm that just like the profundities Chen Shi, absolute beginning, and that swordsman had comprehended, the forbidden area of profundity was the quintessence of the ruins of Tao, and it contained the profundities of the life Tao. Moreover, it was miraculously related to the other three ruins of Tao. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion surged into his heart, and only now did Lin Sun suddenly notice that the energy of his soul had been greatly exhausted. On the other hand, the area before the forbidden area of profundity still seemed to be boundless and without an end. But right at this moment, the eternal vessel on his body suddenly trembled slightly, and then it transformed into a strand of light that flashed out of the hidden world. It flashed past the layer upon layer of chaos in the profound God domain, and it moved along the direction Lin Sun's divine sense extended towards the eternal vessel. Golden Cicada was the first to notice this scene, and his pupils focused. This was a variable that no one had expected. Subhoodie said, "Perhaps Lin Sun has already sensed some profundities, and these profundities are related to the origins of the eternal vessel." They knew a long time ago that the eternal vessel was a mysterious treasure that had flashed out from the forbidden area of profundity a very long time ago, and it was obtained by Taichu in the beginning. But later on, because of the eternal night divine emperor, the eternal vessel had fallen into the outside world, and it had fallen into Lin Sun's hands in the end. The eternal vessel. In the depths of the grand chaos realm, Taichu couldn't help but mutter. This ought to be a variable that was expected a long time ago. But I wonder what effect this treasure will have on Lin Sun's comprehension of the forbidden area of profundity. His voice carried a trace of a strange emotion. Originally, this treasure ought to have belonged to him. Sect Master, Lin Sun has merely comprehended for 7 days, yet the profundities he's comprehended from the forbidden area of profundity seem to have far exceeded our imagination. Black Crow couldn't help but speak. With the experiences left behind by me, Chen Shi, and that swordsman, it would be unusual if he's unable to comprehend even some profundities. In the depths of the ground, Taichu said, not to mention that he possesses the profundities of rebirth, and he himself is an unpredictable variable. In my opinion, the more profundities he's able to comprehend from the forbidden area of profundity, the better it is. Just wait, along with the appearance of the eternal vessel, what Lin Sun will sense next will be something that I look forward to the most. The primordial world. Chun Linkong couldn't help but say, "Grandfather, have you deduced the origins of this eternal vessel? This treasure is from the forbidden area of profundity, just like the river diagram. And it's a chaotic treasure that was born from the quintessence of the forbidden area of profundity. A very long time ago, I and that swordsman had analyzed it together, and we felt that there wasn't merely the river diagram and eternal vessel within the forbidden area of profundity. Moreover, this eternal vessel should be called the vessel of life. After all, it was born within the forbidden area of life." Chanchi said in a light voice, "A few days ago, young brother Lin spoke to me about this treasure as well. According to what he said, this treasure is capable of opening up an eternal door that leads directly into the spirit endowment world. Both of us felt that the eternal vessel is a key that was born from the chaotic quintessence of the spirit endowment world. But now it would seem like the origins of this treasure are obviously not so simple." Chun Linkong was stunned. So in this way, the appearance of this treasure at this moment is a variable? Of course. Chun, she said, "I just don't know if the variable caused by this treasure will bring fortune or calamity to young brother Lin."